Thunder crashed like artillery fire against the night sky. The storm wasn't just weather, it was warfare against everything fragile. Inside his modest wooden home, Mason Carter's calloused hands carefully served mac and cheese onto two chipped plates, one large portion, one small. A father and son's fortress against the storm. Then came the knock. Not a neighbor's casual tap, not a friend's familiar rhythm. This was desperation's knock, sharp, urgent, afraid. Mason froze dish towel still wrapped around his weathered fingers. Another knock more insistent. He opened the door to find her standing there. Expensive coat drenched and clinging to her frame. Designer heels caked with mud. A small child clutched against her chest, shivering violently. But it was her eyes that spoke volumes. They weren't asking. They were pleading. She was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm. He was the janitor who mopped her building's floors. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, she was just a mother seeking shelter, and he was just a man with a warm home and a choice to make. My car. The storm. Her voice cracked, lacking the boardroom authority it usually commanded. Mason didn't hesitate. Get inside, both of you. The woman stumbled across his threshold, her daughter's face buried against her neck. Water pooled beneath them on his worn oak floors. Mason didn't notice. He was already pulling the thickest blanket from his couch, wrapping it around the trembling child. Thank you, the woman whispered. Two simple words that seemed foreign on her lips, as if gratitude was a language she'd forgotten. Sit by the heater. I'll get towels. Mason said, his voice steady. Years of crisis had taught him that panic helped no one. In his small bathroom, Mason gathered every clean towel he owned. His mind raced. There was something familiar about her. The sharp jawline, the way she held herself even in distress. He'd seen her somewhere. He returned to find the woman gently drying her daughter's hair. The little girl's shivering had subsided, but her eyes remained wide with lingering fear. Is she hurt? Mason asked, kneeling to their level. Just cold and frightened, the woman replied. My car slid off the road about a quarter-mile back. Cell service is dead. We've been walking in the rain for 20 minutes before we saw your lights. Mason nodded. Smart to seek shelter in this storm. He handed her a towel. I'm Mason. That's my son, Liam's room down the hall. He's sleeping probably through all this thunder somehow. She hesitated before answering. I'm Caroline. This is Amelia. The little girl looked up at the mention of her name. Mason smiled at her, not a pity smile, but the genuine one he saved for children, the one that acknowledged their courage. Hello, Amelia. You were very brave walking through that storm. He didn't use the high-pitched voice adults often reserve for children. Just simple respect, man to child. Caroline noticed. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps. Let me check your car, Mason said, already reaching for his heavy coat. Maybe it's something I can fix. You don't have to. Storm's not letting up. If it can be fixed, better to know now. He was at the door before she could protest further. The rain hit him like cold needles. Wind threatened to rip his jacket open. Mason bent forward and pushed against nature's fury. 20 minutes of walking, she'd said. With a child, the woman was either desperate or determined, maybe both. The sleek black Audi had slid halfway into a drainage ditch, its front tires submerged in muddy water. One glance told Mason everything he needed to know. This vehicle wasn't going anywhere tonight. Back inside, he shed his dripping coat. Brake lines damaged, can't be fixed in these conditions. No apology in his voice, just facts. You're welcome to stay until morning. I can drive you to town then. Carolyn sat straighter. I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition. It's what neighbors do. He moved to the kitchen. Tea. It's nothing fancy, just the grocery store brand. She nodded, clutching the towel tighter around her shoulders. Mason filled the kettle and placed it on the stove. As he reached for cups in the cupboard, he caught his reflection in the window glass. His face weathered beyond its 40 years. The scar that ran from his right temple to his jawline. A permanent reminder of the fire that had taken everything but his son. Is that your boy? Carolyn asked softly, noticing the framed photo on the refrigerator. A young boy with Mason's eyes grinning with a missing front tooth. That's Liam. He's 6. Pride softened Mason's voice. And his mother. Mason's hands stilled on the cups. Gone. Fire 2 years ago. No platitudes followed. No empty, "I'm sorry," or awkward silence. Instead, Caroline simply nodded. My husband, ex-husband, isn't in the picture either. Left when Amelia was 2. An understanding passed between them. The quiet recognition of battles fought alone. The kettle whistled. Mason poured hot water over tea bags. Nothing ceremonial about it. Just heat against cold, warmth against loss. He handed her a steaming mug. Sugar. This is fine, she said, wrapping her fingers around the cup. The warmth seemed to unlock something in her. I was taking Amelia to her father's for the weekend. He canceled last minute, again, but I'd already promised her. So I thought we'd drive to my lake house instead. Then the storm hit. Mason leaned against the counter, his own mug cradled in hands that bore the marks of manual labor. Promises matter, he said simply. Yes, she agreed, something like respect flickering in her eyes. They do. A small voice interrupted them. Daddy, Mason turned to find Liam standing in the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The boy's dinosaur pajamas were a size too large, the result of buying things children could grow into rather than replace. Hey, buddy, we have some guests tonight. Their car broke down in the storm. Liam blinked at the strangers in his living room. No fear, just curiosity. Like when Mr. Peterson's tractor broke and he stayed for dinner. Something like that. Mason smiled. This is Miss Caroline and Amelia. Liam's attention fixed on the little girl wrapped in their family's blanket. Hi, he said, then added with the directness of childhood, do you like dinosaurs? From beneath the blanket, Amelia nodded slightly. I have lots. Want to see? Before any adult could intervene, Liam had disappeared back to his room, returning moments later with a plastic container of dinosaur figures. He set it on the floor and began arranging them by species, narrating their names with scientific precision. Amelia's eyes widened. Slowly, she slid from her mother's lap to the floor, still clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Caroline started to protest, but Mason shook his head slightly. Let them be kids, he said quietly. Sometimes that's the best medicine for fear. They watched as Liam carefully handed Amelia a purple brontosaurus, his prized possession. Not forced sharing, no, genuine unprompted generosity. You've raised him well, Caroline observed. Mason's eyes never left his son. I'm trying. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against windows like it wanted entry. Inside, 2 children created their own prehistoric world on a worn carpet, oblivious to the adult complexities surrounding them. The fire, Caroline said after a long silence. Was it your home? Mason's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, electrical fault in the walls. Nothing anyone could have predicted. His hand unconsciously touched the scar on his face. I got Liam out first. Went back for Sarah. The words came mechanically, divorced from emotion through repetition. Roof collapsed before I could reach her. Caroline didn't offer sympathy. Instead, she asked, how do you move forward from something like that? Mason looked at her directly. You don't move forward, you move through. Every day, you just move through. For the first time that night, Caroline looked truly unsettled. Not by the storm or their situation, but by the raw honesty of his words. I should check that the roof isn't leaking, Mason said, ending the moment. Years of maintaining buildings had taught him when structures needed inspection and when conversations needed boundaries. As he climbed the short ladder to the attic access, Mason's mind finally connected the dots. Carolyn Blake, CEO of Blake Dynamics. The woman whose name was on his paychecks. The woman who had walked past him a dozen times in the building lobby without a glance of recognition. Now she sat on his second-hand couch drinking grocery store tea. The roof was holding. No leaks yet. When Mason descended, he found Caroline standing by his bookshelf, examining the modest collection of technical manuals and mystery novels. You worked in technology, she said. Not a question. Systems, security, before I became the man who mops your building's floors. Her back stiffened. Recognition dawned in her eyes. You work at Blake Dynamics. Maintenance department. 2 years now. The corporate mask threatened to slide back into place. Mason could see her recalibrating, mentally shifting from stranded mother to employer. He didn't give her the chance. Let me get some bedding for you and Amelia. You can take my room. Liam and I will bunk in the living room. I couldn't possibly. I change the sheets every Sunday. They're clean. No room for argument in his tone, just practical problem solving. Caroline looked like she wanted to protest but glanced at Amelia, now fully engaged in dinosaur play with Liam, and nodded, "Thank you." Mason laid out fresh sheets and a blanket in his Spartan bedroom. No decorative pillows, no artwork on the walls, just a bed, a dresser, and a nightstand with a reading lamp and a single photograph. A woman with Liam's smile and kind eyes. When he returned to the living room, he found Caroline kneeling beside the children, being introduced to each dinosaur by name. Her designer clothes were still damp, her hair drying in natural waves instead of the structured style he'd glimpsed in company newsletters. She looked younger, more human. "Room's ready whenever you are," he said. She looked up, something unreadable in her expression. "Mr. Carter." "Mason." "Mason," she corrected. "I want to thank you properly for your kindness tonight." He shook his head. "No need to thank me. I didn't open my door to the CEO of Blake Dynamics. I opened it to a mother and child caught in a storm." The honesty caught her off guard. "Nevertheless," she said, regaining composure, "your hospitality won't be forgotten." Mason smiled faintly. "Ms. Blake, in my experience, kindness is almost always forgotten once the storm passes. It's human nature." Before she could respond, a tremendous crash of thunder shook the house. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness engulfed them, broken only by lightning flashes through the windows. Amelia cried out. Liam immediately reached for her hand. "It's okay," he assured her. "Dad always has flashlights ready." Sure enough, Mason was already moving through the darkness with practiced ease. A drawer opened, metal clinked against wood. Then a beam of light cut through the blackness. "Power outages are common here during storms," he explained, handing a second flashlight to Carolyn. "The backup generator should kick in for essential circuits." As if on cue, the refrigerator hummed back to life, and a single lamp in the corner illuminated. "Essential circuits?" Carolyn asked. "Refrigerator, one heating, vent, one light. Enough to get by." He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to arrange kindling and logs. "This will give us better heat and light." Carolyn watched as he methodically built a fire, each movement efficient and purposeful. No wasted effort, no uncertainty. The flame caught small at first, then growing steadily. The firelight cast his profile in sharp relief, the strong jawline, the scar more pronounced in the flickering light. A face that had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. "Were you always in systems security?" she asked, settling back on the couch as the children returned to their play, fear forgotten in the adventure of flashlights and firelight. Mason added another log before answering. "Army first, 8 years, then private sector. Built security systems for financial institutions mostly." "That's quite a leap to maintenance work." A log shifted in the fire. Sparks spiraled upward. "After the fire after Sarah, I couldn't focus. Made mistakes. And security mistakes cost jobs, reputations, millions of dollars." His voice remained even matter-of-fact. "Nobody wants a security expert who can't concentrate. But buildings always need fixing. Leaky pipes don't care if your mind sometimes wanders to places it shouldn't." The raw honesty silenced her. In Caroline's world, the world of boardrooms and shareholders, vulnerability was weakness. Failure was unacceptable. Yet here was a man who acknowledged both without shame, not flaunting his wounds but not hiding them either. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Liam said, breaking the moment. Mason checked his watch. "It's late, but I think emergency sandwiches are called for. How about you, Amelia, hungry?" The little girl, now sitting comfortably next to Liam, nodded shyly. "Peanut butter and jelly coming up." Unless, he glanced at Caroline. "Any allergies I should know about?" "No allergies," she replied. "But you don't have to feed us." "Everyone eats in this house," Mason said simply, already heading to the kitchen. Carolyn followed, taking the flashlight with her. "Let me help." In the kitchen, they worked side by side, an unlikely team. The CEO spreading peanut butter while the maintenance man sliced apples. The domesticity of it struck Caroline as surreal. Hours ago, she'd been reviewing quarterly projections in her corner office. "Liam seems very resilient," she observed, watching Mason cut the crusts off his son's sandwich with the precision of long practice. "Kids adapt better than we do," Mason replied. "They live more in the present. It's us adults who get stuck in the past or worried about the future." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of the knife against the cutting board. Lightning flashed outside, followed by thunder that seemed more distant now. "How do you do it?" Carolyn asked suddenly. "Raise 'em alone and work full-time. Keep going after everything you've lost." Mason continued slicing apples, his hands never faltering. One day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. He arranged the apple slices around the sandwiches, creating simple smiley faces on each plate. "And I remember what my father taught me. A man's worth isn't measured by what he owns or what title he holds. It's measured by what he does when life gets hard." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "We all have our storms, Ms. Blake. Some are just more visible than others." Carolyn felt something shift inside her. A recognition, perhaps, that this man saw through the corporate armor she'd spent years perfecting. It was unsettling. It was also strangely liberating. They brought the food to the children, who had created an elaborate dinosaur civilization on the living room floor. Mason sat cross-legged beside them, listening intently, as Liam explained the complex social hierarchy of the prehistoric society they'd invented. Carolyn remained on the couch watching this father who had lost everything except what mattered most. He laughed at his son's jokes, asked thoughtful questions about the dinosaur world, gently encouraged Amelia to share her ideas too. Not once did he check the time or show impatience. In Caroline's world, time was currency, always measured, always insufficient. Her attention was perpetually divided, her mind constantly calculating the opportunity cost of every interaction. Even with Amelia, she found herself thinking of emails that needed responses, meetings that required preparation. But Mason was fully present. His world had narrowed to this moment, these children, this simple meal shared in firelight during a storm. When the sandwiches were gone and eyelids grew heavy, Mason announced it was bedtime. Liam protested half-heartedly, but there was a rhythm to their nighttime routine that brooked no serious argument. "You can leave the dinosaurs right where they are," Mason assured both children. "Their civilization will be waiting in the morning." Caroline stood to guide Amelia toward the offered bedroom, but her daughter clung to Liam's side, reluctant to leave her new friend in the comfort of their created world. "She can stay in my room," Liam offered. "I have a sleeping bag that's really cool. It has stars that glow in the dark." Mason looked to Caroline for approval. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "If you're sure, it's no trouble." "No trouble," Mason assured her. "Liam's room has twin beds anyway. I can set up on the couch." He helped the children prepare for bed, finding a spare toothbrush for Amelia, making sure Liam actually used his, checking that both had water within reach. Carolyn observed his bedtime protocol with interest. It was methodical but warm, structured but loving. When the children were settled, Mason returned to the living room where Caroline sat by the fire. "The storm's passing," he said, gesturing toward the windows where the rain had gentled to a steady patter. "Probably be clear by morning." Carolyn nodded, staring into the flames. "I should thank you again." "Like I said, no need." Mason settled into the armchair opposite her. The leather was cracked with age, but the chair bore the comfortable indentation of a man who'd spent many evenings reading beside the fire. "Your son offered his most prized dinosaur to my daughter within minutes of meeting her," Caroline said after a pause. "That kind of generosity isn't common." Mason smiled slightly. "Kids are born generous. We adults teach them to be otherwise." "Is that a criticism of my parenting?" A defensive edge crept into her voice. "Not at all." Mason's tone remained even. "Just an observation about the world we live in. We teach children to compete before we teach them to care." She couldn't argue with that. Her own corporate philosophy was built on competitive advantage, on outmaneuvering rivals, on securing the largest market share. "Your world and mine are very different," she said finally. Mason looked around his modest living room. The second-hand furniture, the bookshelves made from repurposed pallets, the patched curtains. Then back to her with her manicured nails and subtle designer logos. "Maybe not as different as you think." He leaned forward, firelight casting shadows across his features. "We both wake up every morning with responsibilities, people who depend on us, problems that need solving." He gestured toward the hallway where the children slept. "We both want our kids to have better than we had. We both know what it's like to face the world alone." Carolyn found herself without a ready response. In her corporate life, she always had the last word, the perfect rebuttal. But Mason's simple wisdom stripped away pretense. A log settled in the fireplace, sending sparks dancing upward. Outside, the storm continued its retreat, thunder now a distant grumble rather than an immediate threat. "You should get some rest," Mason said, standing. "Take my room, I'll be fine out here." "I couldn't." "You can and you will." His tone was firm, but not unkind. "You've had a harder night than I have." Too exhausted to argue, Caroline nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." "Mason," he corrected again, a faint smile touching his lips. "Mason," she repeated softly. In his bedroom, Caroline sat on the edge of the neatly made bed. The photograph on the nightstand caught her attention. Mason's late wife, she presumed. The woman was laughing her arm around a much younger Liam. They had the same expressive eyes. Caroline's gaze moved around the sparse room. No television, no computer, just books on the nightstand, a mystery novel, a technical manual on electrical systems, and a well-worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. The simplicity was foreign to her. Her own bedroom featured a custom king-size bed, an integrated smart home system, and a walk-in closet larger than this entire room. Yet something about this space felt more like a home than her luxury penthouse ever had. She changed into the clean t-shirt Mason had left for her, soft with age, bearing the faded logo of the Army Corps of Engineers. The fabric smelled of simple laundry detergent and carried the indefinable essence of a home where people truly lived, not just resided. Sleep came surprisingly easily, her usual insomnia quieted by the rhythmic sound of rain and the lingering warmth of human kindness. Morning arrived with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through curtains that had seen better days. For a moment, Carolyn was disoriented. Then memory returned. The storm, the broken car, the unexpected sanctuary. She dressed quickly in her now dry clothes and made her way to the kitchen, following the scent of coffee. Mason stood at the stove, spatula in hand, expertly flipping pancakes while Liam set the table. No sign of Amelia yet. "Good morning," Mason said without turning. "Coffee's ready, pancakes in 5 minutes." "How did you know I was here?" Carolyn asked, surprised by his awareness. He glanced over his shoulder, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Floorboard by the hallway creaks. Has since we moved in. Keep meaning to fix it." Carolyn poured herself coffee, noting the chipped mug with a child's painted handprint. Everything in this house had history, had meaning. "Amelia's still sleeping," Liam announced, carefully placing forks beside each plate. "She was scared in the night, but I told her my dad keeps all the bad things away." Mason's expression softened at his son's words. "That's right, buddy. That's what dads do." The simple statement carried the weight of a sacred vow. Carolyn thought of her own father, absent more often than present, generous with gifts but miserly with time. Then of Amelia's father, whose promises evaporated like morning dew when more interesting opportunities arose. "I checked your car this morning," Mason said, serving golden pancakes onto waiting plates. "Damage is worse than I thought. Brake lines completely severed and there's frame damage. You'll need a tow truck." Carolyn nodded, already reaching for her phone. "I'll call my assistant. Already called Joe's Towing from town. He'll be here in an hour." At her surprised look, Mason added, "Reception's better in the morning. Phone's on the wall if you need to make any calls." A landline. Caroline couldn't remember the last time she'd used one. Her world ran on smartphones, tablets, and constant connectivity. "Thank you," she said, finding herself genuinely grateful for his foresight. "I should let my office know I won't be in today." Mason nodded, turning back to the stove. "Take your time. Breakfast is ready when you are." The wall phone felt strange in her hand, heavier than her sleek smartphone, the coiled cord a physical tether to this place. She dialed her assistant's number from memory. "Rebecca, it's Caroline Blake." A pause. "Yes, I'm fine. Car trouble during the storm last night." Another pause. "No, I won't be in today. Reschedule everything. And I need a car sent to Bo." She glanced at Mason, who was helping Liam pour maple syrup. 4287 Oakwood Lane, he supplied without looking up. 4287 Oakwood Lane, she repeated into the phone. "Yes, that's in Millfield. Send David with the Bentley." A longer pause. "No, not urgent. Early afternoon is fine." She hung up, the solid click of the receiver, a satisfying conclusion to the conversation. When she turned back, Amelia had appeared, hair tousled from sleep, still wearing her clothes from yesterday. The little girl made a beeline for Liam, who promptly showed her the proper way to pour syrup on pancakes, in a careful spiral, never rushing. They ate together at the small kitchen table, two single parents and two children, an improvised family unit created by circumstance. The conversation flowed easily, centered around the children's dinosaur adventures and plans for the day. The sun's out, Mason observed, glancing out the window at the transformed landscape. Last night's threatening darkness had given way to brilliant morning light. Perfect weather for fixing that bicycle chain in the garage. What do you think, Liam? Should we show the ladies before they leave? Liam nodded enthusiastically. I've been helping Dad fix my bike, he told Amelia proudly. I know all the tools' names now. Can I see? Amelia asked, the most words Caroline had heard from her daughter since arriving. Of course, Mason answered. We've got time before the tow truck comes. After breakfast, they gathered in the small detached garage. Unlike the house, which bore the comfortable disorder of daily life, Mason's workshop was meticulously organized. Tools hung on pegboards in size order. Drawers labeled with precise handwriting. A workbench clean enough to eat from. This is where Dad fixes everything, Liam announced, gesturing around the space with proprietary pride. Mason lifted a child's bicycle onto the workbench. Liam's birthday present from last year. Chain keeps slipping off the gear. We're replacing it today. He demonstrated each step with patient precision, loosening bolts, removing the old chain, measuring the new one. Liam handed him tools before he asked a well-rehearsed dance between father and son. Carolyn watched in fascination. In her world, broken things were discarded and replaced. The concept of repair, of taking the time to understand a problem, to get one's hands dirty in the process of fixing, was foreign. Amelia scooted closer to the workbench, eyes wide with interest. Can I help too? She asked tentatively. Without hesitation, Mason pulled over a sturdy crate for her to stand on. Absolutely. We need someone to hold these bolts very carefully. Think you can them? The girl nodded solemnly, cupping her small hands to receive the metal pieces. Mason showed her how to sort them by size, explaining the purpose of each one in simple terms. Carolyn observed the scene with a complex emotion she couldn't immediately identify. Amelia rarely showed interest in activities outside her ballet lessons and iPad games. Yet here she was fully engaged in a mechanical task, face alight with concentration. Your daughter has good hands, Mason commented quietly to Caroline. Steady, patient. That's rare in kids her age. Pride mingled with an unexpected pang of something like regret. How had she never noticed this quality in her own child? The repair progressed with Mason guiding both children through each step. He never rushed, never showed frustration when small fingers fumbled. Instead, he offered encouragement, specific praise, and the occasional gentle correction. That's it, he told Amelia as she carefully placed a bolt exactly where he had indicated. Perfect position. You've got a natural talent for precision work. The girl beamed under his approval. Carolyn couldn't remember the last time she'd seen that particular expression on her daughter's face. Pure, uncomplicated joy in accomplishment. When the bicycle chain was finally installed, Mason stepped back. All right, Chief Engineer, he said to Liam, take it for a test ride. As Liam pedaled triumphantly around the driveway, the sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Not the expected tow truck, but a sleek black sedan that seemed out of place on the rural lane. That's Derek's car, Amelia whispered, suddenly shrinking against Carolyn's side. Mason's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a firming of the jaw. He wiped his hands methodically on a shop rag, every movement controlled. The car stopped at the end of the driveway. A man emerged, tall, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, moving with the entitled confidence of someone accustomed to deference. Caroline, he called, striding toward them. Rebecca said you were stranded at some janitor's house. His voice carried clearly across the yard, the dismissive tone unmistakable. Mason's posture straightened, but his expression remained neutral, protective rather than confrontational. Derek, Carolyn acknowledged coolly. What are you doing here? Coming to rescue you, of course. Derek's gaze swept over Mason's modest home with poorly disguised disdain. You couldn't possibly be comfortable in these circumstances. Mason stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Derek and the others. Not aggressive, just present. Mr. Carter, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Mason Carter. Derek glanced at Mason's hand, still bearing traces of bicycle grease, and made no move to shake it. Derek Holston, I'm here to collect my family. Ex-family, Caroline corrected sharply. And we're fine, Derek. The tow truck is coming for my car. My driver will be here this afternoon. Derek's attention shifted to Amelia, who had edged behind Mason's leg. Princess, come give Daddy a hug. I've come to take you home. The little girl didn't move. Derek's expression darkened. Amelia, come here now. Mason's voice cut through the tension, quiet but firm. The young lady seems comfortable where she is, Mr. Holston. Derek's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Excuse me, who exactly do you think you are? Just a man who believes children shouldn't be ordered around like toshis, Mason replied evenly. No raised voice, no threatening stance, just calm certainty. Derek took a step forward. Listen, maintenance man. No, you listen. Carolyn moved to stand beside Mason, her corporate authority fully restored. You canceled our arrangements yesterday. You forfeited your weekend. You don't get to show up unannounced and make demands. Derek's face flushed with anger. I had a business emergency. You always have a business emergency. Carolyn cut him off. Meanwhile, Mason here took in two strangers during a storm. Fed us, gave up his bed, fixed my daughter's breakfast. All without complaint or expectation. Her voice hardened. That's what real men do, Derek. They show up when needed, not when convenient. The air between them crackled with tension. Derek shifted his weight, clearly unused to being challenged. This isn't over, Caroline, he said finally. My lawyer will be in touch about revisiting our custody arrangement. Your lawyer is welcome to call my lawyer, Caroline replied coolly. I have excellent documentation of your canceled weekends. Derek's jaw tightened. He glanced once more at Amelia, who remained partially hidden behind Mason. Something like genuine hurt flashed across his features before the mask of indignation returned. We'll discuss this later, he said, turning back toward his car. In private. They watched in silence as he drove away, gravel spraying from beneath his tires. I'm sorry about that, Caroline said once the car had disappeared from view. Mason shook his head. No need to apologize for someone else's behavior. Amelia tugged at Mason's pant leg. Thank you, she whispered, the words barely audible. He knelt to her level. For what, kiddo? For not making me go with him when he was angry. Mason's expression softened. No one should ever have to go anywhere with someone who's angry, not even if that someone is your dad. He spoke the words simply, but they carried the weight of profound truth. Carolyn felt them settle in her chest like stones in still water. The moment was broken by the arrival of a rust-spotted tow truck, its diesel engine announcing its presence long before it came into view. That'll be Joe, Mason said, straightening. Let's get your car sorted out. The next hour passed in practical arrangements. The tow truck driver, Joe, a burly man with a graying beard and easy manner, assessed the damage to Caroline's Audi with professional interest. Frame's bent pretty good, he confirmed, scratching his chin. Brake line's shot too. Gonna need specialized parts. Probably looking at 2 weeks minimum. Caroline nodded, already calculating alternatives. Can you recommend a rental agency? Joe laughed. Nearest Enterprise is 30 miles away in Riverdale, and they've got about 3 cars on a good day. He glanced at Mason. Unless you want to lend the lady your truck. Mason's pickup sat in the driveway. Not new by any standard, but well-maintained. I need it for work, he said simply. But I'm happy to drive Ms. Blake and her daughter wherever they need to go until her car arrives. Carolyn started to protest, but Joe was already hooking up her Audi. I'll get this to my shop and call you with an estimate, he promised. Mason's good people. You're in safe hands. As the tow truck pulled away with her vehicle, Caroline felt a strange sense of displacement. Her carefully ordered world had been disrupted, first by the storm, then by Mason's unexpected kindness, and now by the loss of her transportation. Your driver won't be here until afternoon, Mason observed. Can I offer you more coffee while we wait? The mundane suggestion grounded her. Yes, thank you. That would be nice. Back inside, the children returned to their dinosaur civilization while the adults retreated to the kitchen. Mason brewed fresh coffee, movements efficient and economical. No wasted energy, no unnecessary flourishes. I should compensate you for your hospitality, Caroline said, watching him work. The food, the inconvenience. Mason turned coffee pot in hand. Ms. Blake. Caroline. She corrected, offering a small smile. Caroline. He acknowledged. When everything has a price tag, some things are just what people do for each other. She accepted the coffee he offered, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. In my world, everything has a price. Then perhaps you've been living in the wrong world. The statement should have offended her. Instead, it resonated with an uncomfortable truth. In the corporate realm she navigated, daily relationships were transactional. Value was measured in stock prices and quarterly returns. Success meant accumulation of wealth, power, influence. Yet here in this humble kitchen, with its chipped mugs and faded curtains, she'd witnessed a different kind of wealth. The rich relationship between father and son. The genuine security that came not from alarm systems, but from knowing someone would always open the door when you knocked. Perhaps I have, she admitted softly. Mason leaned against the counter, studying her with quiet intensity. Why did you become CEO? What was the dream behind it? The question caught her off guard. People asked about her strategies, her management philosophy, her views on market trends. No one asked about dreams. Security, she answered after a long moment. My father lost everything when his business failed. We went from country club memberships to food stamps in less than a year. I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again. Mason nodded, understanding in his eyes. So the corner office, the fancy car, their armor. Effective armor, she countered, until the storm hits and you end up on a stranger's doorstep anyway. His words carried no judgment, just gentle observation. Caroline smiled ruefully. Touché. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the children's laughter from the living room. Through the window, sunlight dappled the yard, where puddles from last night's storm reflected the clear blue sky. I meant what I said to Derek, Caroline said finally, about you being a real man, taking us in, helping without question. Mason's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps of values shared despite their different circumstances. I was raised by a father who believed your word was your bond and your character was your legacy, he said simply. Everything else, money, status, possessions, that all comes and goes. But who you are when others need you, that's the only thing that matters in the end. The words settled around them like a mantle. Outside, the last evidence of the storm was evaporating in the strengthening sunlight. Birds had resumed their songs. The world was returning to its normal rhythms. But for Caroline Blake, something fundamental had shifted. Like tectonic plates realigning beneath the surface, the change was invisible, but profound. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly, setting down her coffee mug with decisive precision. Something I haven't told anyone else. Mason straightened, giving her his full attention. Blake Dynamics is being audited. I discovered irregularities in our financial records 2 months ago. Offshore accounts, shell companies' money being laundered through our charitable foundation. Her voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened around the mug. At first, I thought it was a mistake, an accounting error. Then last week, I found evidence that someone is systematically stealing from the company and setting me up to take the fall. Mason's expression didn't change. No shock, no judgment, just focused attention. My CFO noticed discrepancies and started investigating. Then he suddenly resigned, citing personal reasons. Left the country the next day. Caroline's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine fear beneath. If this gets out, everything I've built is gone. My reputation, the company, my ability to provide for Amelia. Why are you telling me this? Mason asked quietly. Caroline met his gaze directly. Because last night, for the first time in years, I felt safe. Not because I had control, but because someone else didn't expect me to have all the answers. Mason absorbed her words, his scarred face thoughtful in the morning light. Do you have proof, documentation of the fraud? She nodded. A hard drive with records. I took it from my office before I left yesterday. It's in my car, in the hidden compartment in the trunk. Joe has your car now, Mason noted. Yes, and I need that drive back before anyone else finds it. The implication hung between them. She was asking for help, not from an employee, but from the man who had opened his door during a storm. Mason considered for a long moment, weighing something in his mind. Then he stood, decision made. I'll call Joe, ask him not to start work on your car until we get there. We can retrieve the drive before he does any serious dismantling. Relief flooded Caroline's features. Thank you. Mason reached for the wall phone, then paused, looking back at her with quiet intensity. This isn't just about a hard drive, is it? How you're being hunted? She didn't deny it. Yes. By whom? I'm not certain yet, but I have suspicions. Her voice lowered. Victor Lang, my COO. He's been pushing for more control over our international divisions, exactly where the money laundering is happening. Mason nodded once, absorbing the information. Then we need to be careful, very careful. The we didn't escape Caroline's notice. This maintenance mate by him, this stranger who had become something more overnight, had just aligned himself with her cause without hesitation or negotiation. As Mason dialed the towing company, she watched him with new eyes. He stood straight back, shoulders squared, voice steady. Not the posture of a broken man, but of one forged through fire. For the first time since discovering the financial irregularities, Caroline felt a flicker of hope. Not because Mason could solve her problems, though his technical background suggested he might have valuable skills, but because she was no longer facing the storm alone. Sometimes she realized the most powerful thing in the world isn't wealth or influence. It's the simple knowledge that when you knock on a door in the middle of a storm, someone will open it without question. And sometimes that makes all the difference. Joe's towing yard sprawled across 3 acres of gravel and concrete, a mechanical graveyard where vehicles awaited resurrection or final judgment. The morning sun reflected harshly off windshields and chrome bumpers. In one corner, Caroline's Audi sat like a wounded animal, its elegant lines now marred by the collision. Mason's pickup truck rumbled to a stop beside the office trailer. "Wait here with the kids," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to crisis management. "Better if Joe doesn't realize the importance of what we're looking for." Carolyn nodded, her manicured hand resting protectively on Amelia's shoulder. The contrast was striking. Her designer watch catching sunlight next to her daughter's small fingers clutching a plastic dinosaur borrowed from Liam. Inside the trailer, Joe looked up from his paperwork. "Mason wasn't expecting you so soon. Thought I'd take a look at Blake's car before you start dismantling it. Might have left something important in there." Joe waved toward a pegboard of keys. "Help yourself. Not starting on it till tomorrow anyway. Got 3 transmissions ahead of it." Mason selected the Audi's key, his weathered fingers decisive. No wasted movement, no hesitation. "Appreciate it, Joe. Won't be long." Back at the pier, Mason opened the trunk with practiced efficiency. "Where's this hidden compartment?" Carolyn leaned in her shoulder, brushing against his as she reached toward the trunk's carpeted lining. "There's a release catch under here. Right about—" A soft click interrupted her words as a panel slid open, revealing a shallow recess. Inside lay a sleek external hard drive, innocuous in appearance, the kind of device that could hold family photos or business presentations, or evidence of crimes worth millions. Caroline's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for it. Mason noticed but said nothing. "This is it," she whispered, clutching the drive like a talisman. "Everything I've found so far." Mason nodded once. "Let's go." They returned to the truck where the children waited, immersed in their own world of dinosaur adventures across the dashboard. Neither adult spoke as they pulled away from the towing yard, the hard drive now secured in Caroline's purse. The rural road stretched before them, bordered by fields still glistening with last night's rainfall. The storm had washed everything clean, leaving behind a world that seemed newer, fresher, more honest. "We should check what's on it," Mason said, finally breaking the silence. "Make sure it's what you think it is." "Yes," Caroline agreed, "but not at your house. If someone's looking for this, I don't want to lead them to your door." Mason's hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "You think they'd go that far? We're talking about billions, Mason. People have killed for far less." He absorbed this information with the same steady calm he'd shown throughout their acquaintance. No panic, no overreaction, just a slight narrowing of his eyes as he recalculated risk factors. "Library in town has private study rooms and computers," he suggested. "But first we need to get the kids somewhere safe." Caroline checked her watch, a discreet Patek Philippe that cost more than Mason's truck. "My driver will be at your house in a few hours. I could have him take Amelia to my sister's in Hartford. Liam too," Mason added. "They should stay together. Safer that way." The implication hung between them. Whatever lay ahead might be dangerous. The children needed to be removed from the equation. Your sister trustworthy? Mason asked bluntly. Most people would have taken offense at the question. Caroline merely nodded. Completely. She's a federal judge, lives in a gated community with security. Good. Mason made a decision. We'll send the kids with your driver. Get them clear of whatever this is, then we look at that drive. They returned to Mason's house to prepare. While Caroline called her sister to arrange the children's visit, Mason packed Liam's overnight bag. He moved with military precision. Clothing, toothbrush, favorite book, The Stuffed Bear, that still provided comfort on difficult nights. Dad, is this a vacation? Liam asked, watching his father's methodical packing. Mason knelt to his son's level, hands steady on the small shoulders. It's an adventure, buddy. You and Amelia are going to visit her aunt for a couple of days, while Ms. Blake and I take care of some important business. Liam's eyes, so much like his mother's, studied Mason's face with surprising perception. Is it dangerous business? Mason didn't lie. Could be. That's why I need you somewhere safe. Can you be brave for me? Keep an eye on Amelia, too. The boy's chest puffed slightly with the responsibility. Yes, sir. Mason pulled his son into a tight embrace, breathing in the scent of childhood. Innocence, impossibility, and uncomplicated love. That's my man. In the living room, Carolyn was finishing her call. 2 children, yes. My driver David will bring them. They'll need the guest room prepared. Her voice carried the crispness of command, but her free hands stroked Amelia's hair with unconscious tenderness. When the call ended, she turned to Mason. It's arranged. Sandra will meet them at the house. Security is already alerted. Mason nodded, shifting seamlessly into tactical planning. What about the driver? He trustworthy. David's been with me for 8 years, former Secret Service, and he's armed. She added the last detail without inflection, but the message was clear: the children would be protected. The waiting stretched time like taffy minutes, elongating with tension. Mason brewed coffee they didn't really want. Caroline checked her phone for emails she couldn't focus on. The children, sensing the adults' unease, played more quietly than usual, dinosaurs migrating in silent herds across the living room carpet. When the sleek Bentley finally appeared in the driveway, Mason's shoulders loosened fractionally. One problem solved. The children would be safe. The driver, David, stepped out ramrod straight in his tailored suit. His eyes scanned the surroundings with professional assessment before approaching the house. Ms. Blake, he greeted with a respectful nod. Then, with the barest hesitation, Mr. Carter. Mason sized up the man with a veteran's instinct. Late 40s, military bearing, eyes that noticed everything. Good. The children need to go to Sandra's, Caroline explained. Directly there, no stops. I've texted you the security codes for entry. David nodded once. Understood, ma'am. His gaze flickered briefly to Mason, then back to his employer. Will you be following later? No, Mr. Carter and I have business to attend to first. I'll call when we're ready to be picked up. If David found anything unusual in these instructions, his professional demeanor revealed nothing. Very good, ma'am. The bags? Mason retrieved the children's overnight bags from the bedroom. The goodbye was brief, necessarily so. Too much emotion might frighten the children, suggest a separation more significant than a few days' adventure. Mind your manners at Mrs. Andra's, Mason told Liam, straightening the boy's collar in a gesture of normalcy. Remember to say please and thank you. I will, Dad. Liam clutched his dinosaur figures in one hand, his small backpack in the other. Ready for adventure, unaware of the stakes. Amelia clung briefly to Caroline's legs before Liam offered his hand. Come on, he said with the simple confidence of childhood. Dad says we're going on an adventure. As the Bentley pulled away, Mason and Caroline stood side by side in the driveway, united in the peculiar ache of parents separated from their children. Different backgrounds, different lines, but in this moment, perfectly aligned. They'll be safe, Mason said as much to himself as to her. Caroline nodded, blinking rapidly. Yes. They watched until the car disappeared around the bend, taking with it their most precious possessions. Now, Mason said, turning toward his truck, let's see what's on that drive. The public library in Millfield occupied a red brick building that had once been the town hall. Its architecture spoke of small-town ambition and civic pride, columns flanking the entrance, tall windows arching toward the ceiling shelves of books that offered escape and education in equal measure. Mason and Caroline secured a private study room in the back away from the main reading areas. A single computer sat on a wooden desk, its outdated monitor a reminder of municipal budget constraints. "Will this work?" Caroline asked, eyeing the computer dubiously. Mason nodded. "Basic file access is all we need for now." He plugged in the external drive, his movements methodical. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The drive contained dozens of folders, each labeled with cryptic alphanumeric codes. No obvious names, no convenient signposts. Deliberate obfuscation. "Start with the most recently modified," Mason suggested. Caroline leaned closer, her shoulder again, brushing his as they both studied the screen. The contact was brief but electric. Two people united by circumstance, drawn together by dangers neither had anticipated. The files revealed a complex web of transactions, money moving between accounts, shell companies redirecting funds, charitable contributions that never reached their stated destinations. To an untrained eye, it might have appeared as normal corporate activity, but Mason saw the patterns immediately. "Classic laundering structure," he murmured, navigating through spreadsheets with practiced ease. "Money goes in dirty, comes out clean." Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. Carolyn's breath caught. "Can you tell who's behind it?" Mason's fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, opening files, cross-referencing data points. "Not directly. They've been careful, but there are timestamps on these transactions. Access logs." He pointed to a column of dates and times. "All these withdrawals happened during board meetings." "When I'd be occupied," Caroline realized. "Unable to monitor the system." "Exactly." They worked methodically through the files, Mason explaining technical details in simple terms, Caroline providing context for company operations. Their different worlds merged in this pursuit of truth. His practical knowledge of security systems, complementing her understanding of corporate structure. 3 hours into their investigation, Mason sat back, rubbing his eyes. "There's a pattern here. All the major transactions wrote through your international charitable foundation before disappearing offshore." Carolyn nodded grimly. "And guess who chairs the foundation's oversight committee?" "Victor Lang." "Yes," her voice hardened. "My second in command, the man I trusted to run half my operations." Mason studied her face, the controlled anger, the hurt beneath the professional mask. Betrayal by a trusted lieutenant cut deep regardless of whether you commanded boardrooms or battalions. "There's more," he said quietly. "These access logs show someone's been in the system using your credentials. Late nights, weekends, times you wouldn't normally be working." Caroline's spine stiffened. "He has my passwords, or something close enough to bypass security." Mason turned to face her directly. "This isn't just about money laundering. They're setting you up to take the fall when it's discovered. Your digital fingerprints are all over these transactions." The color drained from Caroline's face as the full implications registered. This wasn't just about losing her company. This was about potential criminal charges, prison, separation from Amelia. Mason watched the realization dawn in her eyes. Unlike most men in her world, he didn't immediately offer false reassurances or minimize the danger. Instead, he simply asked, "What do you want to do?" The question hung between them. Direct, unadorned, respecting her agency even in crisis. Not telling her what to do, asking. Carolyn straightened, drawing on reserves of strength that had carried her through boardroom battles and divorce courts. "We need more evidence. Something that directly ties Victor to these transactions. Something that proves that my credentials were stolen." Mason nodded, already turning back to the computer. "The system logs might show login locations. If he accessed the network from somewhere you weren't." They dove back into the files with renewed purpose. Outside the window, afternoon shadows lengthened across the library lawn. Inside, two unlikely allies pieced together a conspiracy, one data point at a time. "Here," Mason said, finally pointing to a line of code. "Multiple logins from an IP address in the Cayman Islands 2 months ago." "I've never been to the Caymans," Caroline said, leaning closer. "But according to the company calendar, Victor was there for a banking conference." Mason's voice remained steady, but satisfaction colored his words. "He got sloppy." Carolyn's lips curved in a predatory smile. "Yes, he did." As they gathered their evidence, saving key files to a separate drive Mason had purchased from the electronics store across the street, a new tension entered Caroline's movements. The hunter sensing prey within reach. "We need to move quickly," she said. "If Victor suspects I'm onto him—" The library door swung open, interrupting her. An elderly librarian peered in apologetically. "Sorry to disturb you, but we're closing in 15 minutes. Mason nodded his thanks. "Almost finished." When the door closed again, he turned to Caroline. "We should separate the evidence. Safer that way." She agreed immediately. "I'll take the original drive. You keep the copy." And then, Caroline checked her watch. "I need to call David to pick us up. We can go to my apartment in the city. It has a secure server, better equipment." Mason hesitated, calculating risks. "Your apartment might be watched. If Victor's as thorough as these files suggest, he'll have contingencies." The observation gave Caroline pause. In her world of private elevators and doormen, physical security was something purchased, not questioned. But Mason thought differently, seeing vulnerabilities where she saw amenities. "Where then?" she asked. "I have a friend," Mason said after a moment's consideration. "Former Army buddy who runs a cybersecurity firm in Hartford. Off-the-grid specialized equipment. We can trust him." Carolyn studied Mason's face, weighing the request against her instinct to control the situation. Finally, she nodded. "Call him." As Mason stepped outside to make the call, Caroline remained at the computer, staring at the evidence of betrayal. The foundation she'd created to honor her mother's memory, used as a conduit for crime. The company she'd built from nothing, undermined from within. The reputation she'd guarded so carefully, positioned for destruction. Her hands curled into fists on the desk, knuckles whitening with suppressed rage. Not the cold corporate anger she'd wielded in boardrooms, but something more primal, more personal. When Mason returned, he found her perfectly still, a statue of controlled fury. "Frank can see us tonight," he said. "We'll need to drive to Hartford." Carolyn nodded once decisively. "Let's go." They left the library as the last patrons were being ushered out, the sky above now tinged with the purple hues of approaching evening. Mason's truck waited in the parking lot, its utilitarian profile a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles Caroline typically occupied. As they pulled onto the main road, Mason noticed a black SUV ease into traffic behind them. Coincidence, perhaps? Or perhaps not. "Don't look back," he said quietly, "but I think we're being followed." Caroline's breath caught, but she kept her gaze forward as instructed. "How can you tell?" "Same vehicle that was parked across from the library. Tinted windows, 2 men inside." Mason's voice remained calm, his hands steady on the wheel. "Could be nothing. Let's find out." He made a series of turns through residential streets, each one calculated to confirm his suspicion. The SUV maintained its distance but matched every turn. "Definitely following," Mason concluded. "Question is, how did they find us?" Carolyn's mind raced through possibilities. "My phone could be tracked." "Turn it off. Remove the battery if you can." She complied immediately, her fingers working with unexpected dexterity for someone accustomed to having technical tasks done for her. "What's the plan?" she asked, voice steady despite the circumstances. Mason checked his mirrors again. The SUV had closed the distance slightly. "We need to lose them before we head to Frank's. Can't lead them to our evidence." His mind worked through options with tactical precision. "There's a shopping center coming up. Multiple exits. Heavy foot traffic this time of day." Caroline understood immediately. "We abandoned the truck," Mason nodded. "Temporarily. We'll circle back for it later." The aging pickup accelerated, pushing its limits as they approached the shopping center. Mason's hands were steady on the wheel, his breathing controlled. This wasn't his first evasion. Military training had prepared him for moments like this, when threat assessment and rapid decision-making meant the difference between safety and danger. They pulled into the crowded parking lot, weaving between rows of vehicles. The SUV followed, more conspicuous now as it navigated the tight spaces. "When I stop, we move quickly," Mason instructed. "Head straight for the main entrance. Don't run. That attracts attention. Just walk purposefully." Carolyn slipped off her heels, tucking them into her purse. Practicality overriding fashion. "Ready." Mason parked between 2 larger vehicles, creating visual cover. "Now." They exited the truck, simultaneously falling into step beside each other as they crossed the parking lot. Not touching, but moving in unconscious synchronization. A unit forged through shared danger. Behind them, the SUV had stopped its occupants, momentarily confused by the sudden parking. Precious seconds gained. Inside the shopping center, fluorescent lights and piped music created a bubble of ordinary life. Shoppers pushing carts, teenagers clustered around the food court, a security guard making bored rounds. Mason guided them toward the center of the complex where multiple corridors intersected. "They'll have split up," he said quietly, one watching each exit. Carolyn scanned the crowd with new awareness. "How do we get out?" Mason spotted a department store ahead. "Through there, service exit." He glanced at her designer clothes, conspicuous in this everyday setting. "But first we need to blend in better." Understanding immediately, Caroline followed him into the store. They moved efficiently through the racks, selecting items that would change their silhouettes without drawing attention. A baseball cap and windbreaker for Mason, a hooded sweatshirt and jeans for Caroline. In adjacent fitting rooms, they transformed themselves. Caroline emerged looking like any suburban mother. Comfortable clothes, minimal makeup, visible beneath the hood designer purse, now concealed in a shopping bag. Mason had removed his work shirt, the windbreaker zipped over his t-shirt cap, pulled low over his eyes. They paid in cash, then made their way toward the back of the store where employees occasionally slip through a service door. "Wait for someone to go through," Mason murmured. "Then we follow before it closes." Moments later, a young employee pushed through with a hand truck of inventory. Mason timed their approach, perfectly catching the door just as it was swinging shut. They slipped into the service corridor beyond, a utilitarian space of concrete floors and exposed pipes. "This way," Mason directed, leading them past storerooms and break areas toward a loading dock at the rear of the building. Outside, delivery trucks lined up at various bays. Workers in uniforms moved packages and pallets with practiced efficiency. None spared a glance for the couple emerging from the building, just two more people in a busy world. "Now what?" Carolyn asked, keeping her voice low. Mason surveyed their options. "We need transportation." As if in answer, a taxi pulled up to discharge a passenger at the edge of the loading area. Mason nudged Caroline forward. Perfect timing. Inside the taxi, Mason gave the driver an address in Hartford's business district. Not Frank's actual location, but close enough to walk the remaining distance. As the vehicle pulled away from the shopping center, both passengers fought the urge to look back. The taxi merged into evening traffic, becoming one more anonymous vehicle in the stream of headlights, now illuminating the darkening streets. Mason finally allowed himself to relax fractionally, his shoulder brushing against Caroline's in the back seat. "How did you know what to do back there?" she asked quietly. Mason's eyes remained on the road ahead, watching for any sign of pursuit. "Army trained me for evasion scenarios. 2 tours in hostile territory teaches you to spot when something doesn't feel right." Carolyn studied his profile in the intermittent glow of passing streetlights. The strong jawline, the scar that told its own story of survival, the watchful eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you," she said simply. Mason glanced at her, then back to the road. "We're not safe yet." "I know, but still, thank you." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition that transcended their different worlds. In crisis, status and wealth became meaningless. What mattered was competence, courage, character. The taxi delivered them to a gleaming office tower in downtown Hartford. Mason paid in cash, adding a generous tip with the unspoken request for discretion. They waited until the vehicle disappeared around a corner before heading in the opposite direction. "Frank's place is 6 blocks from here," Mason explained, setting a brisk pace. "Better to approach on foot, harder to track." Carolyn matched his stride, the borrowed sneakers a far cry from her usual footwear. The city hummed around them, traffic noise, distant sirens, the collective murmur of thousands of lives intersecting in urban space. They walked in comfortable silence, alert but not paranoid. Two figures among many on a city sidewalk at dusk, anonymous by choice rather than circumstance. Frank's business occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in a transitioning neighborhood. No sign advertised its presence. No reception area welcomed visitors. Just a steel door with a sophisticated keypad and camera system. Mason pressed the intercom button. After a moment, a gruff voice responded. "Yeah, it's Mason. You expecting me?" A pause, then the electronic lock disengaged with a heavy click. "3rd floor. Elevator's broken. Again." Mason held the door for Caroline. "Frank's security measures are a bit thorough." I'm starting to appreciate thorough, she replied. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, their footsteps echoing in the industrial stairwell. At the top floor, another steel door awaited them. This one opened before they reached it. Frank Dominguez stood in the doorway, a bear of a man with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp and arms covered in colorful tattoos that disappeared beneath rolled shirt sleeves. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp beneath bushy eyebrows. Mason, he greeted, then turned his assessing gaze to Caroline. And this must be the CEO in trouble. Caroline Blake, she introduced herself, meeting his directness with her own. Frank nodded once, apparently satisfied by what he saw. Come in. Place isn't pretty, but it's secure. The space beyond would have given Caroline's interior decorator heart palpitations. Utilitarian furniture competed for space with servers, monitors, and equipment racks. Cables snaked across the concrete floor in organized chaos. Whiteboards covered in diagrams and code fragments lined one wall. The air smelled of coffee and electronics. Command Central, Frank announced with evident pride. Off-grid power air-gapped systems, signal jammers, active 24/7. Pentagon's got nothing on my setup. Mason smiled slightly. Frank takes his privacy seriously. Damn right I do, Frank gestured toward a workstation in the corner. That's yours for tonight. Fresh system, no network connection unless we need it. While Frank prepared the computer, Mason briefed him on their situation. The financial irregularities, the digital frame-up, the pursuit from the shopping center. Frank listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Corporate espionage with a side of money laundering, he summarized when Mason finished. Ballsy play. Carolyn removed the external drive from her purse. Everything we've found so far is on here. We need to analyze it more thoroughly, find concrete proof linking my COO to these transactions. Frank accepted the drive with careful hands. Let's see what we're dealing with. The next hours passed in concentrated work. Frank's expertise complemented Mason's practical knowledge, their military shorthand, creating an efficient partnership that Caroline observed with growing respect. These men spoke a language forged in shared experience, direct, precise, unburdened by corporate niceties or political positioning. Look at this pattern, Frank pointed out, highlighting a sequence of transactions. Same amount moving through different accounts, always on the 15th of the month. Mason nodded. Scheduled transfers, automated. And here, Carolyn added, indicating another spreadsheet, these expense approvals all carry my digital signature, but I never saw these reports. Frank's fingers flew across the keyboard, digging deeper into the data. System logs show login location for these approvals. IP address traces to... Interesting. What? Mason leaned closer. These approvals were processed from within your building, Ms. Blake, but not from your office. They're coming from a conference room on the executive floor. Carolyn's expression hardened. The boardroom, where Victor holds his weekly strategy sessions. Sessions you don't attend, Mason guessed. No, he insisted they were operational details beneath my concern. Bitter irony colored her words. I thought he was being efficient. He was covering his tracks. Frank continued his analysis, peeling back layers of digital deception. He's using a sophisticated proxy to mask most activities, but there's always a trace. Always. His tone carried the conviction of a true believer. No digital defense is perfect. As midnight approached, they had assembled a compelling case. Transaction records, access logs, IP traces, all pointing to Victor Lang as the architect of the fraud. But something still troubled Mason. Why now, he asked, rubbing his tired eyes. Why start investigating you at this particular moment? Carolyn considered the question. The annual audit is approaching. External auditors will have full access to our books next month. So he's accelerating his timeline, Mason concluded, setting you up to take the fall before the real accountants arrive. Which means we don't have much time, Frank added grimly. They worked through the night, stopping only for coffee and the sparse provisions Frank kept in his industrial refrigerator. As dawn broke over Hartford, they had compiled their evidence into an organized presentation, clear enough for law enforcement, devastating for Victor Lang. What now? Frank asked, saving their work to multiple secure drives. Take this to the FBI. Carolyn shook her head. Not yet. I need to confront Victor first. See his face when he realizes I know. Mason frowned. That's risky. He's already demonstrated he's willing to go to extreme measures. I know, but this is my company, my reputation. I need to understand why, what I missed. Her voice carried the weight of personal betrayal beneath the professional concern. Besides, confronting him might reveal who else is involved. The SEC will want all participants, not just the ringleader. Mason studied her face, recognizing the determination there. The need for closure that transcended practical considerations. Then we do it carefully, he said finally. On our terms, not his. Frank raised an eyebrow. You're going with her? Yes. No hesitation in Mason's response. The simple affirmation hung in the air between them. Not a question of professional obligation or financial compensation. Simply a man standing beside someone who needed him regardless of the risk. Carolyn felt something shift in her chest, a warmth spreading beneath her breastbone that had nothing to do with the room's temperature and everything to do with the quiet certainty in Mason's voice. Frank nodded, accepting his friend's decision without further question. Then you'll need backup. Let me make some calls. While Frank arranged additional security, Mason and Caroline prepared for the confrontation ahead. The practical planning, when to arrive at the office, how to ensure Victor would be there, what evidence to present first, created a structure for their shared anxiety. We should check on the children, Caroline said as they finalized their approach. Mason nodded, the mention of Liam bringing a momentary softness to his vigilant expression. Frank has a secure line we can use. The call to Carolyn's sister confirmed what they'd hoped. The children were safe, happily engaged in exploring the judge's extensive library and garden. Amelia had even fallen asleep clutching one of Liam's dinosaurs, a small gesture of trust that spoke volumes. They're fine, Caroline reported, ending the call. Sandra says Liam's teaching Amelia about different dinosaur species. Apparently he's quite knowledgeable. Pride flickered across Mason's tired features. He memorizes the scientific names. Can't always pronounce them correctly, but he tries. The moment of parental connection provided a brief respite from the tension of their situation, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect, not just reputations or companies, but the stable worlds they'd created for their children. Frank returned with news. Got 3 guys from my security team meeting us at Blake Dynamics. Ex-military, discreet professional. They'll maintain perimeter surveillance while you're inside. Thank you, Carolyn said, genuine gratitude in her voice. Frank waved away her thanks. Any friend of Mason's? He left the sentence unfinished, the conclusion obvious. As they prepared to leave, gathering equipment and reviewing their strategy one final time, Frank pulled Mason aside. You sure about this? He asked quietly. Corporate wars can get just as ugly as the real thing. Mason's gaze drifted to Caroline, who stood by the window watching the city awaken below. I'm sure. Frank studied his friend's face, reading between the lines of that simple answer. Be careful, brother. Not just with the bad guys. Mason understood the warning. Emotions complicated tactical situations, created vulnerabilities, but some risks were worth taking. Always am, he replied. They left Frank's fortress as the morning rush hour began. 3 secure drives containing identical copies of their evidence distributed between them. Insurance against catastrophe. Carolyn had changed back into her designer clothes armor for the battle ahead. Mason remained in his practical attire, the borrowed windbreaker and cap now accessories to his natural authority rather than disguises. Frank's security team, 3 nondescript men in business casual clothing, met them at a coffee shop 2 blocks from Blake Dynamics headquarters. The briefing was concise, professional. Positions established, communication protocols confirmed, extraction routes identified if things went sideways. As they approached the gleaming glass tower that housed Caroline's corporate empire, Mason felt her tension rising. Her stride lengthened, her chin lifted. CEO Blake was re-emerging, preparing for confrontation on her home territory. Remember, Mason said quietly as they neared the entrance, no matter what happens in there, we have the evidence secured in multiple locations. He can't bury this. Carolyn nodded, drawing strength from the reminder. Ready. Ready. They passed through the revolving doors together, stepping into the marble-floored lobby, where Mason usually pushed a mop and Caroline commanded respect with her mere presence. Today they entered as equals, united in purpose if not in status. The security guard at the desk did a double take, clearly surprised to see the maintenance worker accompanying the CEO. Good morning, Ms. Blake, he greeted, recovering quickly. Mr. Carter. Morning, Paul, Mason replied easily, as if his presence alongside the company's chief executive were the most natural thing in the world. Caroline headed directly for the executive elevator, Mason at her side. Is Mr. Lang in yet? She asked the guard. Yes, ma'am, arrived about 20 minutes ago. Excellent. The elevator doors closed behind them, creating a momentary sanctuary. Carolyn's carefully maintained composure wavered slightly, her breath quickening as they ascended toward confrontation. He won't expect both of us, Mason observed. That gives us an advantage. Carolyn nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. I never thanked you properly. For all of this. Mason shook his head. Not necessary. It is necessary. Her voice softened. You had no obligation to help me, to risk yourself, your normal life. A faint smile touched Mason's lips. Ms. Blake, I think we left normal behind when you knocked on my door during that storm. The elevator chimed as they reached the executive floor. Caroline straightened her professional mask, sliding back into place. Let's finish this, she said. The executive suite of Blake Dynamics embodied corporate success. Gleaming wood surfaces, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city below. Caroline's assistant looked up in surprise as they approached, clearly not expecting her boss after the previous day's absence. Ms. Blake, we weren't sure when you'd be back. Is Victor in his office? Caroline asked, bypassing pleasantries. Yes, but he's on a call with... Interrupt him. Tell him I need to see him immediately, in the boardroom. The assistant hesitated, registering Mason's presence with obvious confusion. Should I announce both of you? No, Caroline replied. Just tell him I'm waiting, alone. Understanding bloomed in Mason's eyes. Strategic misdirection. Let Victor think he was facing only Caroline. The surprise of Mason's presence would throw him off balance. The assistant nodded and hurried toward the COO's office, while Caroline led the way to the boardroom. An impressive space dominated by a massive table of polished mahogany. Windows along one wall showcased the corporate kingdom Caroline had built. The other walls displayed the company's achievements, awards, press clippings, photographs of Caroline with various dignitaries. Where do you want me? Mason asked, scanning the room with tactical awareness. Caroline considered. By the door. I want to see his face when he realizes you're here. Mason nodded, positioning himself where he'd be initially hidden from anyone entering. Caroline took her customary seat at the head of the table, the external drive placed deliberately before her. Power positioning, home field advantage. Minutes later, the door opened. Victor Lang strode in, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Mason's monthly salary. His confident smile faltered slightly when he saw Caroline's expression. Caroline didn't expect you back so soon after your adventure. His voice carried the practiced charm that had served him well in corporate politics. Heard about your car trouble. Terrible timing with that storm. Close the door, Victor, Caroline replied, her tone glacial. He complied, still unaware of Mason's presence behind him. Is everything all right? You seem tense. Sit down. Victor's eyebrows rose at her tone, but he moved toward his usual chair. That's when he noticed Mason standing silently by the door. What's the janitor doing here? Confusion and the first flicker of alarm crossed his features. Caroline's smile was razor sharp. Mr. Carter isn't here as maintenance staff today. He's here as my security consultant. Victor froze halfway to his seat. Security consultant, I don't understand. Sit. Down. Each word precise, commanding. Victor lowered himself into the chair, his confident facade beginning to crack. Caroline, what's this about? In answer, she pushed the external drive toward the center of the table. 3 years of financial fraud, money laundering through our charitable foundation, and digital impersonation. That's what this is about. The color drained from Victor's face, but he recovered quickly. That's a serious accusation, and completely unfounded. Is it? Caroline leaned forward. We have transaction records, Victor. Access logs showing you used my credentials to approve fraudulent transfers. IP traces from the boardroom computer, this very room, where you conducted your business while I was in meetings you arranged. Victor's eyes darted to Mason, then back to Caroline. We, you, and the maintenance man. This is absurd. He forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. If you had actual evidence, you'd have brought the authorities, not the janitor. Mason spoke for the first time, his voice steady. The authorities have copies of everything. So do several secure off-site locations. This meeting isn't about gathering evidence, Mr. Lang. It's about giving you a chance to explain yourself before your arrest. The calculated bluff hit its mark. Victor's confidence wavered visibly. You're making a mistake, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Whatever you think you found has been misinterpreted. Caroline activated the conference room screen with a remote displaying the first of many incriminating documents. These offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, registered to shell companies that trace back to your brother-in-law's law firm. Coincidence. Victor's jaw tightened. Business relationships are complex. These access logs, Caroline continued, advancing to the next slide, showing my digital signature approving transactions I never saw, all processed during your weekly strategy sessions. Another coincidence. Each piece of evidence landed like a physical blow. Victor's posture deteriorated from confident executive to cornered animal. His eyes darted around the room, calculating escape routes, possibilities for denial. Who else is involved, Victor? Caroline pressed. Is it just you, or should I be looking at other members of my executive team? Victor's laugh was brittle. You think I'd tell you that? You think you can just walk in here with your pet janitor and I'll confess everything? Actually, Mason interjected calmly, that's exactly what's happening. Victor turned his glare toward Mason. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Do you know who I am? What I'm capable of? A thief in an expensive suit, Mason replied evenly. And yes, we have a pretty good idea what you're capable of, including sending men to follow us yesterday. Surprise flickered across Victor's face, confirmation they hadn't expected. He hadn't known about the tale. Caroline caught the reaction immediately. You didn't send those men? Victor's expression closed. I don't know what you're talking about. Who else is involved, Victor? Caroline demanded, new urgency in her voice. Who would have the resources to track us? To know we were investigating? Victor stood abruptly, straightening his suit jacket with a return of his corporate composure. This conversation is over. You have nothing concrete, just speculation and coincidences. I suggest you reconsider these wild accusations before I'm forced to take legal action for defamation. As he turned toward the door, Mason shifted slightly, not blocking the exit, but making his presence unavoidable. Running won't help, Mr. Lang. This evidence isn't going away. Victor paused, then turned back to Caroline. For a moment, his mask dropped, completely revealing the cold calculation beneath. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Caroline. This is bigger than me, bigger than Blake Dynamics. His voice lowered. Walk away. Take a vacation. Forget what you think you found. Is that a threat? Caroline's voice remained steady, but Mason noticed her hands tighten on the arms of her chair. Victor smiled thinly. Consider it friendly advice from someone who knows the players involved. Players who won't appreciate your interference. Before Caroline could respond, the boardroom door burst open. Two men in dark suits entered, not security guards, but something more dangerous. Their stance, their watchful eyes, their hands positioned for quick access to concealed weapons, all screamed professional enforcers. Victor's surprise seemed genuine. What are you doing here? This wasn't the plan. Change of plans, the taller man interrupted, his gaze fixed on Caroline. Mrs. Blake, you need to come with us. Mason moved instantly, positioning himself between Caroline and the newcomers. That's not happening. The second man reached inside his jacket, but Mason was faster. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the heavy crystal award from the credenza behind him and hurled it with precision. It struck the man's arm with enough force to disrupt his jaw. Chaos erupted. Victor lunged for the evidence drive on the table. Caroline snatched it away, backing toward the windows. The first enforcer advanced on Mason, who met him with the calm efficiency of combat training. No wasted movement, no hesitation. A precisely placed strike to the solar plexus, followed by a sweep of the legs that sent the larger man crashing into the conference table. Caroline, the door. Mason called out, already engaging the second man who had recovered from the initial surprise. She understood immediately, darting for the exit while the men were occupied with Mason. Victor moved to intercept her, but years of corporate ruthlessness were no match for a mother's determination to return to her child. Carolyn's elbow connected with Victor's ribs, with surprising force driving the air from his lungs. The security alarm began blaring. Frank's team outside monitoring through the glass had triggered the system. Reinforcements would be coming. They just needed to hold out. Mason grappled with the second enforcer, their struggle sending chairs crashing across the polished floor. The man was trained professional, but Mason fought with the focused intensity of someone protecting not just himself but others. Each movement deliberate, each counter precise. A blow caught Mason across the cheek, splitting skin. Blood trickled down his face, but he barely registered the pain. Adrenaline narrowed his world to immediate threats and necessary responses. The first enforcer had regained his feet, now moving to cut off Caroline's escape. Mason saw the danger, but couldn't break free from his current opponent. "Caroline, behind you." She turned just as the man reached for her, the external drive clutched protectively against her chest. With nowhere to retreat, Caroline did the unexpected. She attacked. Her designer heel drove down onto the man's instep with targeted precision, followed by a knee strike that suggested self-defense training at some point in her corporate ascent. The momentary advantage gave Mason the opening he needed. Breaking free from his opponent with a practiced twist, he crossed the room in 3 strides and delivered a devastating right hook to the first enforcer's jaw. The man crumpled unconscious before he hit the ground. "Go," Mason urged, already turning to face the remaining threat. "Get to Frank's team outside." Carolyn hesitated, unwilling to leave him. "Go," he repeated. "The evidence is what matters." Understanding the strategic necessity, she ran for the door. Victor, recovered from her earlier blow, moved to intercept her once more. "You're not taking that drive anywhere," he snarled, desperation erasing his executive veneer. Carolyn didn't slow. "Watch me." Their collision sent both stumbling, but Caroline maintained her grip on the precious drive. As Victor reached for her again, the boardroom door burst open. Frank's security team flooded in, weapons drawn, professional focus evident in their coordinated movements. On the ground now, the command brooked no argument. Victor froze, calculating his options and finding none. The second enforcer, seeing the odds shift dramatically, raised his hands in surrender. Mason straightened, breathing heavily, blood dripping from his split cheek. His eyes sought Caroline's across the chaos of the overturned boardroom. Their gazes locked, a moment of connection amid destruction. "You okay?" he asked simply. She nodded, clutching the evidence drive like a lifeline. "Thanks to you." Building security arrived moments later, followed by local police responding to the alarm. The controlled corporate environment had descended into crime scene chaos. Statements taken, evidence, secured, suspects detained. Victor and his accomplices were led away in handcuffs, the COO's tailored suit incongruous with his new status as criminal suspect. As he passed Mason, Victor paused momentarily. "You have no idea what you've done," he murmured. "This goes beyond corporate fraud. There are people who won't let this stand." Mason met his gaze steadily. "Threats sound hollow when you're wearing handcuffs." Hours later, after police statements and preliminary discussions with FBI agents who arrived with surprising speed, Mason and Caroline found themselves alone in her office. The adrenaline had faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Caroline sat behind her desk, the familiar trappings of corporate power surrounding her. Mason occupied a visitor's chair, an ice pack pressed to his swollen cheek. "The FBI agents said they've been investigating Victor for months," Caroline said, breaking the contemplative silence. "Apparently, our charitable foundation wasn't his only laundering operation." Mason nodded. "That explains the quick response. But not who sent those men to follow us yesterday." Caroline's brow furrowed with concern. If Victor was surprised by their appearance, then someone else is involved. Mason finished her thought. Someone with resources. The implication hung between them. This wasn't over. The confrontation in the boardroom had been just one battle in a larger war they didn't fully understand yet. Caroline's phone chimed with an incoming message. "It's David. He's bringing the children back from Sandra's." Relief softened her features momentarily before concern returned. "But if we're still being watched, we'll protect them," Mason assured her, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Both of them. The simple promise, "we not I," spoke volumes about how their relationship had evolved in the space of 48 hours. from strangers divided by social hierarchy to allies united by shared purpose. Carolyn studied him across the expanse of her desk, this maintenance man with his split cheek and unwavering resolve. In her world of corporate alliances and strategic partnerships, trust was a commodity rarely exchanged without careful calculation. Yet here she sat trusting this man with not just her company's future, but her daughter's safety. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Mason set aside the ice pack, wincing slightly as he straightened. "We keep digging. Find out who Victor was working with, who sent those men yesterday. We protect the children." He paused, meeting her gaze directly, "and we weather whatever storm comes next." Outside her office windows, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, nature's own warning of turbulence ahead. But within the room, something else was building. Not certainty exactly, but determination. The shared resolve of two people who had glimpsed each other's true character under pressure and found it worthy of trust. The storm that had brought them together had passed, but larger tempests loomed. Yet Carolyn Blake found herself oddly unafraid. For the first time in years, she wasn't facing the weather alone. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Mason's living room, casting striped shadows across the sleeping children. Liam and Amelia lay curled on opposite ends of the pull-out sofa, their breathing deep and even. Dinosaur figures stood sentinel on the coffee table, a plastic Jurassic honor guard watching over childhood dreams. In the kitchen, Mason worked methodically, preparing breakfast with the quiet efficiency that characterized all his movements. Coffee brewed, eggs cracked into a bowl, bread sliced for toast, normal actions in abnormal circumstances. Carolyn sat at the small kitchen table, phone pressed to her ear, voice low to avoid waking the children. "Yes, I understand the board's concerns. No, I can't disclose all the details until the FBI completes their investigation. Yes, I'll be at the emergency meeting this afternoon." Mason placed a mug of coffee before her without interrupting. Black, no sugar. He'd noticed her preference during their time together. Small details absorbed and remembered. The maintenance man who missed nothing. "Thank you," Carolyn mouthed, silently covering the phone briefly. Mason nodded once, returning to the stove where eggs sizzled in the cast iron pan. "I assure you the company's interests remain my highest priority," Carolyn continued, corporate diplomacy coating her words despite the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. "This situation will be resolved quickly and transparently." She ended the call with a psh, setting the phone face down on the table as if to physically distance herself from its demands. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the boardroom. 3 days of FBI interviews, board reassurances, and heightened security protocols. 3 days of Mason's spare bedroom becoming command central for their continued investigation. "Board's getting nervous," Mason asked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast before her. Caroline nodded, wrapping her fingers around the warm coffee mug. Victor was well-liked, charming, convincing. Some still can't believe he was involved in something so elaborate. People see what they want to see. Mason's voice held no judgment, just the steady wisdom of someone who had learned this lesson through hard experience. Carolyn studied him as he moved around the small kitchen. The split on his cheek had begun to heal, a new mark to join the older scar that tracked his jawline. His movements remained precise despite the bruising across his ribs, evidence of the fight he'd never mentioned to the children. "The FBI located those men who followed us," she said after a thoughtful silence. "Professional surveillance team hired through a shell corporation. They're still working to trace who hired them." Mason nodded, unsurprised. "And Victor? Still claiming he was just a middleman. Says he was recruited by someone higher up, but he's refusing to name names." Caroline's frustration edged her words. "He's scared of someone, Mason. Someone more dangerous than federal prosecution." Before Mason could respond, small footsteps padded across the living room floor. Amelia appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair tousled from sleep, one of Liam's dinosaurs clutched in her small fist. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Carolyn's expression softened instantly, corporate concerns yielding to maternal priorities. "Good morning, sweetheart. Mr. Mason's making breakfast." The little girl approached the stove cautiously, watching Mason flip pancakes with practiced ease. Unlike most adults who towered over children with unintentional intimidation, Mason slightly crouched, bringing himself closer to her eye level. "Want to help?" he asked, offering her a wooden spoon. "These pancakes need stirring." Amelia nodded, accepting the utensil with solemn responsibility. Mason guided her hand gently as she stirred the remaining batter, his patience infinite, his focus complete. Nothing existed in that moment beyond teaching a small person a simple skill. Carolyn watched the interaction with a complex emotion she couldn't immediately identify. In her world of nannies and scheduled quality time, such ordinary moments of connection were rare treasures. Mason created them effortlessly, instinctively, the natural rhythm of a father who understood that childhood was built from these small intersections of trust and learning. Liam joined them minutes later, sleep-rumpled but immediately alert at the prospect of breakfast. He slid onto a chair at the table, eyes bright with the resilience of youth. "Dad, can we work on the treehouse today?" he asked, reaching for the juice Mason had poured. Mason exchanged a quick glance with Caroline. A silent communication developed over their days of partnership. "We got some important work to finish first, buddy, but maybe later this afternoon." Liam's face fell slightly, but he nodded with the pragmatic acceptance of a child accustomed to adult priorities. "Okay, can Amelia help when we do?" "If she wants to," Mason replied, setting plates before the children. "And if it's okay with her mom." All eyes turned to Caroline, the corporate executive, suddenly conscious of being the potential obstacle to childhood joy. "Of course she can," she said quickly, "if she'd like to." Amelia looked up from carefully arranging her pancake pieces. "What's a treehouse?" Liam's eyes widened with disbelief. "You don't know what a treehouse is. It's a house in a tree." As Liam launched into an enthusiastic explanation complete with pancake piece illustrations, Mason caught Caroline's eye again. A moment of understanding passed between them. Amelia's world of penthouses and private lessons had left gaps in her childhood experience that Liam's more modest upbringing had naturally filled. "You'll love it," Mason assured the little girl. "It's like having a secret castle above the ground." Breakfast continued with the children's chatter providing a veneer of normalcy. Beneath it, Mason and Caroline remained vigilant, the weight of unresolved threats pressing against their awareness. Armed security personnel patrolled the property perimeter, their presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of danger. When the children finished eating and moved to the living room to continue their dinosaur saga, Mason leaned closer to Caroline, voice lowered. "Frank called while you were in the shower. He's found something in the financial records we missed before." Caroline's expression sharpened, CEO focus returning. "What?" "Recurring payments to a holding company called Sentinel Strategic." Mason's tone remained conversational, though his eyes regularly checked the children's position. "Registered in Delaware, but Frank traced the ownership through 3 shell companies to a private equity firm called Ironclad Partners." Recognition flickered across Caroline's face. "Ironclad tried to acquire Blake Dynamics 2 years ago. Hostile takeover attempt. We fought them off." "Maybe they found another way in," Mason suggested, "through Victor." Carolyn's mind worked through the implications with practiced precision. Financial fraud, manipulated records, a CEO facing potential criminal charges. Blake Dynamics stock would plummet. Perfect opportunity for a bargain acquisition. "Elegant strategy," Mason acknowledged. "Criminal but elegant." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Mason rose immediately, hand instinctively reaching toward the small of his back where a weapon would have been during his military days. "Expecting anyone?" he asked quietly. Caroline shook her head, already moving toward the children with protective instinct. Mason approached the door cautiously, checking the security monitor installed after their return. Frank Dominguez's broad shoulders filled the screen. "It's Frank," Mason called, tension easing, as he unlocked the door. Frank entered carrying a laptop bag and the grim expression of someone bearing unwelcome news. "Morning, folks. Got something you need to see." The adults retreated to Mason's bedroom-turned-office, while the children remained engrossed in their play. Frank opened his laptop on the desk, pulling up financial records and news articles with rapid efficiency. "Ironclad Partners isn't just a private equity firm," he explained, gesturing toward the screen. "They're a front. Multiple government contracts, shell companies in 7 countries, former intelligence officers on the payroll. They're into something a lot more profitable than corporate acquisitions." "Like what?" Carolyn asked, leaning closer to the screen. "Like selling proprietary technology to foreign governments." Frank pulled up another document, a heavily redacted government report. "Got this from a contact at the DOI. Ironclad's been under investigation for years, but they're careful. Professional, no direct evidence." Mason studied the information with tactical assessment, and they wanted Blake Dynamics because, "Your advanced semiconductor division," Frank replied, looking at Caroline. "Your new processing chips have dual-use applications, civilian and military, worth billions on the international market." Caroline's breath caught as the pieces aligned. Victor wasn't just embezzling, he was positioning the company for takeover so Ironclad could access our technology and sell it to the highest bidder, Mason concluded. Explains why he's so afraid to name names. These aren't ordinary businessmen. Frank nodded grimly. The men who followed you at the mall, professional contractors. Ex-military, probably special forces. Ironclad uses them for operations they want kept quiet. The implications settled heavily in the room. This wasn't merely corporate fraud. It was international arms trafficking, technology theft, potentially even treason. "We need to take this to the FBI, Caroline said, the corporate executive yielding to the responsible citizen. "Already done," Frank assured her. "My DOJ contact is briefing the special agent in charge as we speak. But there's more." He hesitated, glancing at Mason. "Ironclad knows where you are. Their surveillance team identified this location before the FBI picked them up." Mason's expression hardened. "Then we need to move, now." "Where?" Caroline asked. "If they found us here—" "I have a place," Frank interrupted. "Cabin in the Berkshires. Off-grid, defensible, stock for emergencies. No digital footprint." Mason nodded, already calculating logistics. "How soon can we leave?" 20 minutes, Frank replied. "Transportation's arranged. Clean vehicles switched twice in a row." Caroline's gaze drifted toward the living room where children's laughter provided counterpoint to their grave discussion. "I should call my sister again." "No calls," Frank cut in. "Not even secure lines. These people have resources beyond ordinary corporate espionage. The fewer electronic traces, the better." Mason placed a hand on Caroline's shoulder, a brief anchoring contact. "The children will be safer with us. We can protect them better than anyone else right now." She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. "Then we leave in 20 minutes." Preparation was efficient, practiced. Mason packed essentials with military precision while Caroline gathered the children's things. No explanations beyond surprise adventure for Liam and Amelia, who accepted the sudden departure with the adaptability of youth. Frank oversaw security arrangements, coordinating with his team through encrypted communications. Professional, methodical, thorough. 19 minutes later, they left through the back door. Two nondescript SUVs waited in the alley, one for Frank's security personnel, one for Mason, Caroline, and the children. No corporate luxury vehicles, no recognizable profiles, just anonymous transportation designed to blend rather than impress. As they pulled away, Mason caught Caroline's gaze across the back seat where they flanked the children. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Leaving meant abandoning the known for the uncertain, but sometimes safety required movement rather than fortification. The journey unfolded according to Frank's careful planning. Vehicle switches in crowded shopping centers, indirect routes through back roads. No digital devices active except Frank's specialized equipment, old-school tradecraft in a modern world. The children accepted the day's strange rhythm as an extension of their adventure, especially when lunch materialized as a picnic by a stream rather than a rushed drive-through meal. Mason spread a blanket beneath towering oak trees, transforming necessary concealment into childhood memory-making. "Real adventures sometimes mean unexpected detours," he explained to Liam and Amelia as they ate sandwiches beside sparkling water. His tone made it sound like wisdom rather than evasion. Carolyn watched him navigate the complexities of truth and protection with the children, never lying yet shielding them from fear, finding joy in necessary caution, creating security through presence rather than promises. By late afternoon, they reached the Berkshires, Massachusetts highlands, where forests climbed steep slopes and civilization thinned to scattered properties hidden among trees. Frank's cabin occupied a defensible position halfway up a mountain, accessible only by a single switchback road that offered clear sightlines in all directions. The structure itself belied the term cabin. Reinforced walls, security shutters, solar panels, and satellite communications disguised as ordinary roof elements. Less vacation home, more civilian fortress. "Welcome to the Alamo," Frank announced as they pulled into the camouflage garage. "Not pretty, but it'll keep you safe until this mess gets sorted." Inside, practical comfort replaced aesthetic considerations. generator-powered electricity, well water, propane heat, stocked pantry, multiple bedrooms with basic furnishings, a great room centered around a massive stone fireplace that offered both warmth and cooking capability if modern conveniences failed. The FBI will send agents tomorrow, Frank explained, as the adults gathered in the kitchen while the children explored their temporary home. Until then, my team will maintain perimeter security. What about Blake Dynamics? Caroline asked. The board meeting, postponed, Frank replied. FBI's orders, too much risk of ironclad operatives attending. Better to let them think you're still preparing your defense rather than building a case against them. Mason leaned against the counter, arms crossed, mind working through tactical considerations. How much does the FBI know about Ironclad's involvement? Enough to take it seriously, Frank assured him. Not enough for immediate arrests. They need more concrete connections between Victor's activities and Ironclad's principles. Carolyn's expression hardened with determination. Then we give them those connections. The evening settled into domestic routines shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Mason cooked a simple meal while Caroline helped the children arrange their borrowed rooms. Frank coordinated security rotations with his team, professional vigilance never wavering. After dinner, the fireplace drew them together, its warmth and light creating a primal sense of safety that technology couldn't replicate. Liam and Amelia built elaborate dinosaur scenarios on the hearthrug, their imaginations transforming smooth stones into prehistoric landscapes. They're resilient, Mason observed quietly as he and Caroline sat on the couch watching the children play. They shouldn't have to be, she replied, a mother's regret coloring her words. Not like this. Mason considered her profile in the firelight, the corporate armor temporarily set aside, revealing the woman beneath. Children adapt to the world we give them. The question is what they learn from it. And what are they learning from this running, hiding danger? Maybe. Mason's gaze returned to the children who were completely absorbed in their game. Or maybe they're learning that some things are worth protecting. That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's necessary despite the fear. The simple wisdom settled between them, another bridge across their different worlds. Frank joined them, laptop in hand. Got something, he announced without preamble. Trace those Sentinel strategic payments back further. They weren't just going to Victor. Carolyn straightened. Who else? Harold Winters. The name hit Caroline like a physical blow. My CFO, the one who resigned suddenly. Frank nodded grimly. Payments started a month before he left. Continued for 2 weeks after. Then stopped. He found the irregularities in our accounts. Caroline recalled pieces aligning in her mind. He came to me concerned, then suddenly resigned for personal reasons. Said he needed to care for his mother in Arizona. Arizona, Dominican Republic, what's the difference? Frank's sarcasm carried an edge. He's been living in Santo Domingo since he left. New identity, new house, new boat. Mason's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. They bought him off. He discovered the fraud, but instead of exposing it, he sold his silence. And when he started getting nervous about the arrangement, they eliminated the liability, Frank added. No more payments because no more Harold. Carolyn's expression darkened. You think they killed him? No confirmation yet, Frank replied, but my contacts are checking Dominican Republic police reports for unidentified bodies. The brutality of corporate espionage elevated to potential murder silenced the room, the children's play providing unsettling counterpoint to adult realities. We need to compile everything, Mason said finally. All the connections, all the evidence. Give the FBI a complete picture when they arrive tomorrow. They worked late into the night building their case meticulously. Financial records, timeline reconstructions, connection maps linking Victor Harold Ironclad and the shell companies. Professional thoroughness driven by personal stakes. The children had long since been tucked into beds, the mountain darknesses wrapping around the cabin like a protective cloak. Only the security team remained active, rotating positions with military precision. Near midnight, as Mason and Caroline reviewed their assembled evidence at the kitchen table, the cabin's satellite phone rang. Frank answered, his expression growing increasingly serious during the brief conversation. We have a problem, he announced, ending the call. FBI agents were ambushed en route here. 2 injured, none killed, but they won't be arriving tomorrow. Mason straightened, instantly alert. Ironclad. Frank nodded. Almost certainly. Someone at the Bureau must be compromised. They knew exactly which agents were coming and their route. So we're on our own, Caroline concluded, her voice steady despite the implications. Not entirely, Frank replied. My team's still here and the Bureau's sending another detail, flying them in to avoid predictable roads. But they won't arrive until tomorrow night at earliest. Mason checked his watch. That gives Ironclad at least 24 hours to find us if they know we're here. Do they? Caroline asked. Frank's expression provided answer enough. We have to assume they're looking, and they have resources we can't match. Then we prepare, Mason said simply, the soldier emerging from beneath the maintenance man's exterior. Defensive positions, evacuation routes, contingencies. The night passed in vigilant preparation. Mason and Frank secured the cabin's approaches, established fallback positions, verified equipment functionality. Caroline alternated between helping with security measures and checking on the sleeping children, corporate strategist and protective mother in equal measure. Dawn broke clear and cold over the mountain's sunlight filtering through autumn leaves like stained glass. Mason stood on the cabin's porch, scanning the surrounding forest with practiced awareness. The world's beauty remained undiminished by human threats, a reminder that some things persisted regardless of mankind's complications. Carolyn joined him, two steaming mugs in hand. She offered one silently, the simple gesture carrying the weight of shared purpose. Frank's team reported movement on the access road, she said after a moment. Still 5 miles out, but approaching. Mason nodded unsurprised. How many? 3 vehicles, unknown occupants. They stood side by side watching the sunrise paint the distant ridgeline golden, an incongruous moment of beauty amid tactical calculations. The children, Mason asked. Still sleeping. Frank's preparing the basement safe room just in case. Mason took a sip of coffee, the hot liquid grounding him in the present moment. If it comes to that, you'll stay with them. Not a question, not quite an order, a statement of what must be. Carolyn's spine straightened with familiar determination. And you, I'll make sure no one reaches that safe room. The simple declaration hung between them. The maintenance man's promise to stand between her children and danger. No grandstanding, no dramatic vows, just the quiet certainty of a man who understood his role in the unfolding scenario. Caroline studied his profile against the morning light. The strong jawline, the healing cut on his cheek, the vigilant eyes that missed nothing. In her world of corporate maneuvering, promises were negotiating positions. In Mason's world, they were unbreakable contracts written in character rather than legal language. Why are you doing this, Mason? She asked finally. This isn't your fight. Blake Dynamics isn't your company. The technology theft doesn't affect you personally. Mason turned to meet her gaze, his expression unguarded in the early light. Some things transcend personal interest. Some lines can't be crossed without response. That's very noble, but it's not nobility, he interrupted gently. It's necessity. If people like Ironclad succeed, if they can steal technology, threaten families, corrupt officials without consequences, then what world are we leaving for our children? The question silenced her corporate pragmatism. Beyond balance sheets and legal strategies lay the fundamental question of what kind of world they were building, not just for shareholders, but for Liam and Amelia. Frank emerged from the cabin's satellite phone in hand, expression grim. Got confirmation on those vehicles. Not local, not law enforcement. Heavily tinted windows, no identifiable markings. Ironclad, Caroline concluded. Most likely, Frank agreed. They must have tracked us somehow. Mason drained his coffee, mind shifting fully into tactical mode. How long until they reach the access road? 30 minutes at their current pace. Then we have 28 minutes to get ready. They moved with purposeful efficiency, waking the children with reassuring normalcy while preparing for potential conflict. Mason explained to Liam and Amelia that they might need to play a special hiding game in the basement room, an adventure, not a frightening necessity. Like hide and seek, Amelia asked, brushing her doll's hair with untroubled focus. Exactly, Mason confirmed, kneeling to her level. But once you're hiding, you stay hidden until your mom or I come get you, no matter what you hear. Okay? The little girl nodded solemnly, accepting the instruction with a child's trust in adult protection. Frank's security team took defensive positions around the property perimeter. Professional discipline prepared. Mason checked communications equipment one final time, ensuring clear channels between all defenders. 20 minutes, Frank announced, checking the satellite feed on his laptop. They've reached the lower access road. Caroline stood by the window watching the winding road that approached the cabin. Her corporate experience had included hostile takeovers, board coups, and competitive espionage, but nothing involving armed men approaching a hideaway in the mountains. "What do they want?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The evidence," Mason replied, standing beside her, "and to eliminate loose ends." The brutal assessment hung in the air between them. Not just corporate assets at stake now, lives, futures, children. "Get Liam and Amelia to the safe room," Mason said quietly. "Stay with them. No matter what happens, stay there until the FBI arrives." Carolyn turned to face him, fully reading between the lines of his instructions. "You're planning something." A faint smile touched Mason's lips. "Just contingencies." Before she could press further, the satellite phone rang again. Frank answered, his expression shifting from concern to surprise as he listened. "It's for you," he said, holding the phone toward Caroline. "It's just Victor Lang." The unexpected development froze the room momentarily. Caroline accepted the phone with cautious confusion. "This is Caroline Blake." Victor's voice came through, clearly tension evident beneath his usual polish. "Caroline, listen carefully. I don't have much time." "Why should I listen to anything you have to say?" Cold fury edged her words. "Because Ironclad is coming for you, and I'm the reason they know where to look." The admission carried no trace of his former corporate smoothness. "I made a deal with the FBI. Full cooperation for reduced charges. Told them everything about Ironclad's operation. And they leaked it." Carolyn concluded the pieces of the lining. "Someone inside the Bureau working for Ironclad." "Yes," Victor's breath audibly shook. "These people aren't just corporate raiders, Caroline. They're something much worse. Former intelligence officers, military contractors, people who operate beyond ordinary laws." Mason moved closer, head tilted to hear the conversation. "Why are you telling me this now?" Carolyn demanded. "Because this wasn't supposed to happen," Victor replied, unexpected emotion bleeding through his words. "Corporate espionage technology acquisition. That was the plan. Not violence. Not children in danger." The mention of children sharpened Caroline's focus. "What do you know about their approach?" 3 teams, 6 operators total, former special forces. They want the evidence you've gathered and—" He hesitated. "And what?" "No witnesses," Victor finished quietly. "I'm sorry, Caroline. I never wanted this." Mason took the phone gently from Caroline's hand. "Mr. Lang, this is Mason Carter." A pause, then recognition. "The maintenance man." "Listen carefully," Mason continued, ignoring the designation. "You owe Caroline and those children a chance. What vehicles are they driving? What equipment do they have? How are they approaching the property?" Victor's response came without hesitation. Tactical details delivered with unexpected precision. Mason listened intently, mentally mapping the approaching threat against the cabin's defensive capabilities. 15 minutes out, Frank reported from his laptop. Mason ended the call with a terse acknowledgement to Victor. "Get the children to the safe room," he instructed Carolyn. "Frank, reposition your team based on this new intel. They'll split into 3 approaches. Main Road, East Ridge, West Drainage." As Frank relayed the adjusted defensive plan to his team, Mason turned to Carolyn. The corporate executive had been replaced by the protective mother. Determination hardening her features, fear for her child evident only in the tightness around her eyes. "This isn't a corporate takeover," Mason said quietly. "These are trained operators coming to eliminate evidence and witnesses. The FBI won't arrive in time. We need to evacuate." "How?" Carolyn asked. "If they're watching all approaches—" "There's an old logging trail behind the property," Frank interrupted, rejoining him. "Steep, overgrown, but passable with the right vehicle. I've got a modified Jeep in the equipment barn." Mason nodded. "We take the children out that way while your team creates a diversion at the main approach." "My team stays," Frank confirmed grimly. "Hold them as long as possible. Give you time to reach the secondary location." The plan crystallized with military efficiency, extraction route timing, communication protocols. No debate, no alternatives. Simply the clearest path through dangerous terrain. 10 minutes, Frank reported. You need to move now. Carolyn gathered the children with calm urgency, explaining they were going for a special jeep ride through the forest. Adventure framing necessity. Liam and Amelia responded with excitement rather than fear, trusting the adults who had become their unified protective force. As Frank's team prepared for defensive engagement, Mason loaded essential supplies into the waiting jeep. Water, food, medical kit, satellite communication equipment. Practical necessities for uncertain circumstances. Caroline secured the children in the jeep's back seat, checking harnesses with meticulous attention. Her designer clothes had long since been replaced by practical attire: jeans, hiking boots, flannel shirt. CEO transformed by circumstance into something more fundamental, more resilient. 5 minutes, Frank announced, handing Mason a satellite phone. This connects directly to my secure network. FBI extraction coordinates are already programmed in. Just follow the route on the GPS. Mason accepted the device with a nod of acknowledgement. No lengthy farewells between soldiers. No emotional displays. Just the shared understanding of necessary sacrifice. Keep them safe, Frank said simply. I will. Mason's response carried the weight of absolute commitment. As he climbed into the driver's seat, Mason caught Caroline's gaze across the vehicle. A moment of silent communication passed between them. Recognition of the journey ahead, both literal and metaphorical. Ready, he asked. She nodded, reaching back to squeeze the children's hands reassuringly. Ready. The Jeep's engine rumbled to life as Mason engaged the modified four-wheel drive. Ahead lay dense forest, steep terrain, and uncertain passage. Behind them, Frank's team prepared to hold off trained operatives with lethal intent. Mason navigated the overgrown logging trail with practiced skill, the vehicle climbing steadily away from the cabin in the approaching threat. The children treated each bump and jolt as part of the adventure, their laughter providing surreal counterpoint to the adults' tense vigilance. Through the trees below, they glimpsed the approaching ironclad vehicles, black SUVs moving with professional precision toward the cabin. The confrontation they were leaving behind. Will Frank and his team be okay? Carolyn asked quietly, watching the vehicles through gaps in the foliage. Mason kept his eyes on the difficult trail. Frank's been in worse situations. He knows what he's doing. The answer acknowledged reality without surrendering hope, the balance Mason maintained in all aspects of his life. As they crested the ridge leaving the cabin and its defenders behind the satellite phone chirped with an incoming message, Mason handed it to Caroline while he navigated a particularly challenging section of trail. It's from the FBI, she reported, reading the encrypted text. New extraction coordinates, change of plans due to compromise. Mason nodded, processing the tactical adjustment. Give me the new location. Carolyn relayed the coordinates, which Mason programmed into the GPS. The revised route would take them deeper into the mountains before descending toward a small regional airport where FBI agents would meet them. The journey continued in focused silence, broken only by the children's occasional questions and the Jeep's engine straining against the rugged terrain. An hour passed, then two. Distance growing between them and immediate danger, but uncertainty remaining their constant companion. As they navigated a steep switchback, the satellite phone chirped again. Caroline checked the message, her expression shifting from concentration to confusion. That's strange, she murmured. It's requesting confirmation of our current position. Mason's tactical instincts flared. The FBI already has our GPS tracking through this phone. They wouldn't need to ask. Understanding dawned in Caroline's eyes. It's not the FBI. No, Tish. Mason's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Someone's compromised the communication channel, possibly using Frank's credentials. The implications settled heavily between them. If Ironclad had overcome Frank's team and accessed his secure network, they were now following a predictable path toward a false extraction point. What do we do? Carolyn asked the corporate executive, yielding to Mason's expertise in this domain. Mason considered their options with tactical precision. We change the plan, take an unexpected route, break the pattern they're expecting. He turned the Jeep onto a barely visible game trail, the vehicle lurching as it left the established path. The children squealed with excitement at the increased bouncing, interpreting the evasive maneuver as part of their adventure. Where are we going? Carolyn asked, bracing herself against the dashboard as they navigated the rough terrain. There's a small town about 15 miles north. Mason replied, fully focused on the challenging driving. Riverside, population 800, local sheriff's office. We can contact the FBI directly from there. The revised route took them through dense forest and across shallow streams, the modified Jeep straining against natural obstacles never intended for vehicular passage. Mason drove with the concentrated skill of someone whose life had depended on vehicle handling in hostile terrain. Look, Mom, a deer. Amelia's delighted voice broke through the tension as a white-tailed doe bounded away from their approach. Caroline managed a smile for her daughter's benefit. Yes, sweetheart. Very beautiful. The moment of childhood wonder amid crisis reminded both adults of what they were fighting to protect. Not just physical safety, but the right to innocence, to discovery, to joy uncomplicated by adult corruption. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the forest, they finally emerged onto a rural county road. Civilization of sorts. Mason checked the satellite phone, now turned off to prevent tracking, then surveyed their surroundings with veteran's caution. We'll approach town from the PM roads, he decided. Less visible. Find the sheriff's office directly. Carolyn nodded, trusting his judgment implicitly. A significant evolution from the CEO accustomed to directing rather than following. The small town of Riverside appeared ahead, nestled in a valley beside its namesake waterway. Ordinary America in autumn splendor. Pumpkins on porches, flags fluttering from mailboxes, children's bicycles leaning against white picket fences. Mason drove cautiously through residential streets, avoiding the main thoroughfare where strangers would be more noticeable. The sheriff's office occupied a modest brick building near the town hall, its parking lot containing 2 patrol vehicles and a handful of civilian cars. Wait here with the children, Mason instructed, pulling the Jeep into a secluded spot behind the building. I'll make contact first, verify it's secure. Carolyn nodded, already turning to reassure Liam and Amelia that their adventure was continuing as planned. Mason watched her briefly, this woman who had seamlessly transitioned from corporate command to protective maternal focus. Adaptable, resilient, trustworthy under pressure. Inside the sheriff's office, Mason found small-town law enforcement at its most fundamental. A reception desk, a few offices, cells in the back. The deputy at the front looked up with casual interest as Mason entered. Help you, sir. Mason assessed the young officer quickly. Early 30s, military haircut, alert eyes, despite the relaxed posture. Likely a veteran himself. I need to speak with the sheriff, Mason said. It's an urgent federal matter. The deputy's expression shifted subtly, professional interest replacing casual greeting. Sheriff Collins is out on a call. I'm Deputy Harding. Maybe I can help. Mason made a rapid tactical decision. Limited disclosure to gain necessary assistance. I have 2 adults and 2 children in protective custody. Need to contact the FBI field office in Boston directly. Secure line, not radio or regular phone. Deputy Harding studied Mason with heightened attention, noting the healing cut on his cheek, the vigilant posture, the clear communication style. Recognition of shared background. Military boss, he asked simply. Army, 8 years. The deputy nodded once. Marines, 2 tours. The shorthand established trust between men familiar with crisis management and chain of command. No unnecessary questions. No bureaucratic obstacles. We've got a secure line in the sheriff's office, Deputy Harding said, standing. This way. As they moved toward the back office, the front door opened. Mason turned automatically, situational awareness never diminishing. 2 men entered. Business casual clothing, pleasant expressions, nothing overtly threatening in their appearance. Yet something in their movement pattern, their visual assessment of the space, triggered Mason's internal alarm. Deputy Harding, one greeted with practiced ease. FBI, Agents Monroe and Phelps. He produced identification that looked official at first glance. We're following up on a suspicious vehicle reported in your jurisdiction. Dark green Jeep modified for off-road use. Mason's muscles tensed, ready for immediate action. The timing was too convenient. The approach too smooth. These weren't FBI agents. They were ironclad operators using the most direct method to locate their targets. Deputy Harding, however, seemed to accept their credentials. Haven't seen any vehicle matching that description, but I can check the patrol logs. As the deputy moved toward the computer, Mason caught his eye briefly. A silent communication. Veteran to veteran. Something's wrong. The deputy's hand shifted slightly toward his sidearm, recognition of potential threat registering in his posture. May I see those credentials again, sir? The first agent smiled pleasantly, stepping forward to comply. Of course. Mason moved simultaneously, placing himself between the approaching men in the hallway leading to the back exit, and to Caroline and the children in the Jeep beyond. Those aren't Bureau IDs, he stated calmly. Wrong holographic pattern, wrong badge number sequence. The atmosphere in the small office crystallized into dangerous potential. Deputy Harding's hand now rested openly on his weapon, professional caution fully engaged. Sir, I'm going to need you both to place your hands on the counter, the deputy instructed, voice firm with authority. For a moment, equilibrium balanced on a knife's edge. Local law enforcement, Mason's protective stance, the false agent's smooth facade. Then the balance tipped. The first man moved with professional speed, reaching beneath his jacket. Deputy Harding drew his weapon with practiced efficiency, but Mason was already in motion. Years of combat training translating into precise action. He tackled the deputy sideways as a suppressed weapon appeared in the false agent's hand. The shot impacted the wall where the deputy had stood seconds before. What followed unfolded with the chaotic precision of close-quarters combat. Mason and Deputy Harding against two trained operatives in the confined space of a small-town sheriff's office. No room for error. No margin for hesitation. Mason used environmental advantages, tipping a filing cabinet to create temporary cover, using a chair as both shield and weapon. Not the choreographed violence of action films, but the brutal efficiency of survival fighting. Deputy Harding recovered quickly from the initial surprise, his military training evident in his coordinated response. Together they contained and ultimately subdued the ironclad operatives, one unconscious from Mason's precisely delivered strike, one wounded by the deputy's return fire. There will be others, Mason warned, as Deputy Harding secured the prisoners. These were just the advance team. The deputy nodded grimly, already reaching for his radio to call for backup. County tactical response is 20 minutes out. State police, maybe an hour. We don't have 20 minutes, Mason replied, moving toward the back exit. I need to get the civilians to safety now. Understanding the priority of protecting innocents, Deputy Harding made a quick decision. Take my personal vehicle. Blue pickup in the back lot. Keys are in my desk drawer. I'll call ahead to Sheriff Collins. He's got a hunting cabin off Highway 16. Isolated, defensible. You can hole up there until proper federal agents arrive. The offer of personal transportation and shelter, one veteran trusting another with his own resources, spoke to a code that transcended official protocols. Thank you, Mason said simply. Get those kids somewhere safe, Deputy Harding replied. I'll handle things here. Outside, Carolyn had already sensed something wrong. The Jeep's engine was running, her posture alert behind the wheel, ready for immediate departure. Relief flooded her expression when she saw Mason approach. We need to move, he explained briefly. Different vehicle, different location. She asked no unnecessary questions, immediately transferring the children to the deputy's pickup truck. Liam and Amelia, sensing the adult's urgency, but shielded from its cause, treated the vehicle change as part of their continuing adventure. Are the good guys coming soon? Liam asked as Mason secured his seatbelt. Mason met the boy's trusting gaze directly. Yes, but until they get here, we need to stay extra safe, like hiding during a thunderstorm. The simple explanation satisfied the child. Danger acknowledged but contextualized in terms he could understand without fear. They left Riverside via back roads, Mason navigating according to Deputy Harding's hastily sketched directions. The sheriff's hunting cabin lay 10 miles beyond the town limits, accessed by a private drive that would be difficult to find without specific knowledge. What happened in there? Carolyn asked quietly once the children were engrossed in counting animals spotted through the windows. Ironclad operators, Mason replied, keeping his voice equally low. Using FBI cover. They're tracking us systematically. Carolyn processed this with remarkable composure given the circumstances. And Frank, Mason's expression tightened. No word. We have to assume they've compromised his communication network. The implications settled between them. Allies potentially lost safety, temporarily secured but increasingly uncertain. Yet neither yielded to despair. Both had weathered personal storms that taught the same essential lesson: keep moving forward one step at a time. Sheriff Collins's cabin appeared ahead, a sturdy structure of logs and stone nestled against a rocky hillside, more substantial than vacation accommodation, less visible than permanent residence. defensible position, limited approaches, good sightlines. Mason parked the truck behind the cabin, using the structure itself as visual cover from the access road. "Stay here until I check the interior," he instructed Caroline, who nodded without argument. The cabin proved secure, solid construction, basic amenities, clearly the retreat of someone who valued self-sufficiency. Mason signaled the all clear, and Caroline brought the children inside, maintaining the adventure narrative that had sustained them through danger they didn't comprehend. As afternoon faded toward evening, Mason secured the perimeter, while Caroline settled the children with snacks and games found in the cabin's sparse but thoughtful provisions. Practical tasks, creating normalcy amid extraordinary circumstances. "How long do we wait here?" Caroline asked as they stood in the cabin's small kitchen, preparing a simple meal from canned goods. Mason checked his watch, a practical timepiece rather than the status symbol Caroline's executives typically wore. Deputy Harding will have contacted legitimate FBI agents by now. They'll need time to mobilize, verify our location, establish secure approach. 6 hours minimum. Carolyn absorbed this assessment with the same steady focus she'd bring to a complex business challenge. "And if Ironclad finds us before then?" Mason's gaze shifted briefly to the children now engaged in a board game by the fireplace. Liam explaining rules to Amelia with earnest patience. Innocence preserved through adult vigilance. "We have defensive advantages here," he replied. "Limited approaches, good visibility, solid structure." The tactical assessment delivered without embellishment or false reassurance. As darkness settled over the mountains, Mason completed final security checks. Approaches monitored, escape routes confirmed, defensive positions established. Caroline tucked the children into the cabin's small bedroom, their excitement finally yielding to exhaustion after the day's adventure. Alone in the main room, Mason and Caroline found themselves in a moment of relative calm amid ongoing crisis. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting warm light against log walls. Outside, nature continued its ancient rhythms. Crickets chirping, leaves rustling, stars emerging in the clear mountain sky. "You should rest," Mason suggested, noting the fatigue evident in Caroline's posture despite her determined focus. "I'll take first watch." She shook her head, moving to stand beside him at the window, where he maintained vigilant observation of the approach road. "I couldn't sleep anyway." They stood in companionable silence. The distance between maintenance man and CEO dissolved by shared purpose and mutual respect forged through crisis. "What happens after this?" Carolyn asked finally. "When it's over, one way or another." Mason considered the question carefully. Ironclad will face federal investigation. Blake Dynamics will recover. The technology they wanted will be protected. "That's not what I meant." Mason turned to meet her gaze, directly understanding the real question beneath the surface. "You go back to running your company. I go back to maintaining your building. Is that what you want?" Caroline's question carried no corporate calculation, no negotiating position. Simple human inquiry. Mason's expression softened slightly in the firelight. "What I want and what happens aren't always the same thing. I learned that when Sarah died." Carolyn studied his profile. The strength, the scars both visible and hidden, the unwavering resolve that had protected her and the children through extraordinary danger. "It could be different this time," she suggested quietly. Before Mason could respond, headlights appeared on the distant access road, pinpoints of light cutting through mountain darkness. Tactical focus immediately replaced personal consideration. "Vehicle approaching," Mason observed, moving toward the weapon Deputy Harding had provided. "Single unit, moving cautiously." Carolyn shifted instantly from personal connection to protective alertness. "Ironclad." "Possibly." Mason positioned himself strategically, angled, providing coverage while minimizing exposure. "Or it could be our FBI extraction." The headlights grew closer, following the winding access road with deliberate progress. Mason studied the approach pattern, assessing threat indicators. "Standard Bureau vehicle profile," he noted. "No tactical approach pattern, maintaining regular speed." Carolyn moved to check on the children, ensuring they remained safely asleep despite the approaching vehicle. When she returned, Mason had shifted position to observe from a different window. "They're stopping at the designated approach point," he reported. "Two individuals exiting the vehicle. Standard Bureau procedure." A handheld radio crackled to life, the emergency communication device Deputy Harding had provided. Sheriff's Cabin, this is Special Agent Roberts, FBI, Boston Field Office. Authentication code Sierra Tango 947, responding to Deputy Harding's notification. Please confirm your status. Mason checked the authentication code against the sequence Deputy Harding had provided. Match confirmed. This is Mason Carter with Caroline Blake and 2 minors. Authentication acknowledged. Approaching cabin now. Affirmative, the agent replied. Myself and Special Agent Lawson only. Hands visible, standard protocol. Mason maintained vigilant observation as the 2 agents approached. Professional, methodical, by-the-book bureau procedure. No tactical red flags, no deception indicators. When they reached the cabin porch, Mason opened the door cautiously, weapons still accessible but not brandished. The agents presented credentials. Proper format, correct holographic patterns, verifiable badge numbers. Mr. Carter, Agent Roberts greeted formally. Ms. Blake, we're here to extract you to a secure location. A full protective detail is establishing perimeter security as we speak. Mason verified their identities with professional thoroughness before allowing them entry. No detail overlooked, no assumption unchallenged. The children's safety permitted no margin for error. What about Frank Dominguez and his team? Carolyn asked as the agents explained the extraction plan. Agent Roberts' expression sobered. Mr. Dominguez and his personnel are secure. 2 injuries, none critical. They held off the ironclad operators long enough for state police to respond. Relief washed through both Mason and Caroline, and allies' safe sacrifice rewarded with survival. And the evidence? Mason asked. Being processed now, Agent Lawson confirmed. Combined with Mr. Lang's testimony, it's enough to move against Ironclad's principles. Arrests are being coordinated across multiple jurisdictions. The crisis was ending. The system, imperfect but ultimately functional, was responding. Justice delayed but not denied was in motion. As they prepared for extraction, gathering the sleeping children and essential belongings, Mason and Caroline found themselves momentarily alone in the cabin's small kitchen. The agents outside making final security assessments before movement. This isn't over yet, Mason cautioned, ever the pragmatist. Ironclad has resources, connections. Carolyn nodded, accepting the reality without surrendering to fear. I know, but we've done what needed to be done. The rest is in the hands of the proper authorities. Mason studied her face in the dim light, the corporate executive who had become something more through crisis. Stronger, more grounded, more human. Earlier, he said quietly, you suggested things could be different. Carolyn met his gaze directly. I still believe that. Our worlds are very different. They were, she acknowledged, but I'm not sure they are anymore. The simple exchange contained multitudes, recognition of barriers both real and constructed, acknowledgement of connection forged through extraordinary circumstances, possibility of bridges between disparate lives. Before Mason could respond, Agent Roberts called from outside. Vehicles ready. Time to move. They gathered the sleeping children, Liam in Mason's arms, Amelia in Caroline's. Partners in protection. Allies in crisis. Perhaps something more in whatever future awaited beyond immediate danger. As they stepped out into the mountain night, stars spread across the vast sky above. Constant, unchanging witnessing human dramas with cosmic indifference. The same stars visible from penthouse windows and modest porches. The same constellations guiding both corporate jets and pickup trucks. Perhaps Caroline thought as they moved toward the waiting vehicles, their worlds weren't so different after all. Perhaps what mattered most was not the external trappings of success or status, but the internal qualities revealed under pressure. Courage, loyalty, integrity, love. Perhaps the storm that had brought them together had washed away artificial boundaries, revealing the essential humanity beneath. Only time would tell. But for now, they moved forward together, the maintenance man and the CEO unified by shared purpose and mutual respect, carrying precious cargo toward whatever tomorrow might bring. 1 year later, autumn sunlight gilded the maple leaves in front of the porch. No longer Mason's modest house nor Caroline's luxurious penthouse. This was something new, a small farmhouse on the edge of town with a sprawling yard and trees all around. Mason sat on the steps, a steaming mug of coffee in his weathered hands, watching Liam and Amelia collaborate on a dinosaur city made of colorful wooden blocks. The children had grown inseparable over the past year, sharing secrets and imaginary adventures only children truly understand. "Dad," Liam called excitedly. "Look, we made a bridge for the T-Rex," Mason smiled, setting down his coffee. "Excellent engineering, buddy. That's some smart design work." Soft footsteps sounded behind him, and Caroline emerged onto the porch, her hair loose instead of the tight corporate style she once favored. She wore jeans and a sweater, simple attire that a year ago might never have appeared in her wardrobe. "That was the office," she said, settling beside Mason. "The final case against Ironclad just concluded. 15 years for Bernard Ross." Mason nodded, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Justice finally served. The past year had seen many changes. Blake Dynamics still existed, but under new leadership. Caroline maintained controlling interest, but had relinquished the CEO position to focus on her new foundation, an organization supporting single-parent families and orphaned children. The work allowed her to balance corporate strength with human compassion in ways her previous role never permitted. Mason now headed the security division of both the company and the foundation, his military and technical expertise finally recognized and properly utilized. No more maintenance work, though he still occasionally fixed things around the office, claiming it helped him think. "Frank's coming for dinner," Carolyn reminded him, leaning against his shoulder. "He's bringing that woman from the Justice Department he's been seeing." "Helen," Mason supplied. "Smart lady." Gave the closing argument in the ironclad prosecution. They sat in comfortable silence watching the children play. The dinosaurs had formed an unlikely alliance with a collection of dolls, creating a civilization that spanned most of the front yard. "Do you ever miss it?" Mason asked quietly. "The corner office, the board meetings, the power." Carolyn considered the question, her fingers intertwining with his. "Sometimes. For about 5 seconds." She smiled, watching Amelia carefully balance a tower of blocks. "Then I remember what really matters." The scars of their ordeal hadn't vanished completely. Occasional nightmares still disrupted sleep. Security precautions remained a part of daily life. But healing had come in unexpected ways, through shared meals, homework help, and a treehouse built by many hands over many weekends. "Sarah would have liked this," Mason said softly, his gaze drifting toward the oak tree where a wooden swing moved gently in the autumn breeze. "This home, these children together." Carolyn squeezed his hand, understanding the weight of his words. They had both learned that new beginnings didn't require erasing the past, only finding ways to carry it forward with honor. The sound of a car approaching drew their attention. David, Caroline's former driver, pulled into the driveway. No longer in a Bentley, but a sensible SUV, appropriate for his new role as head of Foundation Transportation. "Ms. Sandra's here," Amelia announced, jumping up from her dinosaur city as Caroline's sister emerged from the vehicle carrying a large covered dish. "I brought lasagna," Sandra called, "and case files for you to review, though I told the office you're officially off duty until Monday." The federal judge had become a regular visitor, her initial skepticism about Mason giving way to genuine respect after witnessing both his testimony during the ironclad trials and his unwavering devotion to the children. As more cars arrived, Frank's truck neighbors bearing side dishes, colleagues who had become friends, the farmhouse came alive with voices and laughter. No security teams patrolling the perimeter now, just people gathering to celebrate another week survived and enjoyed. Later, as dusk settled over the property and outdoor lights illuminated the yard, Mason found Caroline standing alone by the ancient oak tree, gazing up at the emerging stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her beneath the branches. "I was just thinking about that storm," she replied, "the night I knocked on your door." Mason nodded, understanding immediately. Some storms destroy, others clear the path forward. Caroline turned to face him, her expression softened by the gentle evening light. "Do you remember what you told me that night about a man's worth being measured by what he does when life gets hard?" "I remember. I think about that every day," she said quietly. "It changed everything for me. How I see success, how I measure value, what I want to teach Amelia." Mason touched her cheek gently, his calloused fingers against her skin, embodying the bridge they'd built between different worlds. "Some lessons come with a high price tag." "Worth every penny," she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. From the porch came the sound of children's laughter and adults' conversation, the symphony of ordinary happiness that had once seemed impossible during those dangerous days. A life neither of them had planned yet somehow perfectly fitted to the people they had become. As they walked back toward the warmth and light of their home, hand in hand, Mason glanced once more at the night sky. Stars shone with ancient constancy above the changing landscape of human lives. Some things remained eternal: courage, integrity, the choice to protect what matters most. And sometimes, if you were fortunate, a storm that threatened destruction could instead deliver exactly what you needed most: the person meant to walk beside you through whatever weather might come.